Look, y'all, I want to welcome everybody here this morning, and we may have a few more coming in. I think traffic always has something to do with meetings, so my name's Vance Smith, and I'm chairman of the study committee. Glad to have Representative John Corbett here, and John just left a few minutes ago getting here. He lives pretty close. Matter of fact, he lives not down on the Florida line. He left about 2:15 this morning to get here, so I don't want to hear any moaning in the crowd about what time you had to leave. But appreciate everybody coming. Just to kind of fill you in for just a second, because we want to get straight to the presenters. We started back in September. We had our meeting in Athens. A great crowd there. We had about 50 people show up. A lot of great presentations, a lot of great questions and comments. That was in September. In October, we were in Tipton. We had between 35 and 40 people show up. And great crowd there, again, great presentations and great presenters. And here we are in Dahlonega. We will end up with a date for our last meeting in December. We have some agendas back here too. If you need an agenda, I see Ben's got some. Just raise your hand if you need an agenda. Maybe back there in the back, we got one or two up front. Back here too. And but we really appreciate everybody taking time to come. I know if you read a lot of the articles that come off of Capitol Hill, there've been quite a few comments about housing, and so it's always interesting. Sometimes when you create a study committee, and then all of a sudden articles start coming out, so that works out pretty good. But anyway, I'm gonna stop right there. John, you want to make a comment or two?
Go ahead. No problem. We got up there. Anyway, good to be here this morning. If you come to Atlanta about 5:30 in the morning, traffic's not bad. But anyway, I appreciate what Vance does. He's doing a great job with the study committee. Look forward to hearing the presentation today. And anyway, let's get started.
All right, sounds good. Okay, first, we're going to dive right into it. We're going to have DCA come up, and then you can come up as a team. You can use this table on the side, and I know you probably have some maybe PowerPoints or whatever you have. We appreciate you coming.
We do not. We're going to lead off with a bunt single.
A bunt single is what we're going to do. All right, we still got baseball. No, that's good. Appreciate y'all coming, man. I'll let y'all do your own introductions once you get up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kyle Hood. I'm the Division Director for Community Development at DCA, here representing Commissioner Nunn and Deputy Commissioner Rusty Haygood. We have our Legislative Affairs staff, Seth Coker's here with us, and Sedville Tides, who's our Director of Construction Codes and Industrialized Buildings. We appreciate this opportunity to participate. We know a number of the members of this audience today. We work well with them as part of our State Codes Advisory Committee. As I'm sure you're aware, the SCAC, the State Codes Advisory Committee, along with Ted and his staff, are responsible for the review and adoption of state minimum standard building codes. There are 9 of these codes and 3 additional permissive optional codes. They are amended and adopted by the state, and quite frankly, we believe they serve as a safety net to ensure that construction throughout the state is completed with an understanding that life safety and structural and operational integrity are non-negotiable. So members of this audience and the agencies they represent comprise the 21-person State Codes Advisory Committee, and they represent various public and private interest groups. We like to outreach and engage, take opportunities like this anytime we can to get in front of not only public officials, but other folks in the industry to make sure we're all on the same page, working well together to advance growth and development through the construction industry across the state. We like to work directly with local governments, training and developing and using these opportunities to prepare them for the adoption and application of these codes within their own jurisdictions. And we're here today at your pleasure, sir, So we want to make sure that any questions you have specifically about the State Codes Advisory Committee, the adoption of the state code, and any amendments, we want to make sure that we answer any questions that you members present today have about how the maintenance of that code and any changes that may be forecasted. So we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Let me make one statement too, and this, y'all, we're real laid back here, very informal, but I made an error. I wanted to also recognize Ben, Jared in the back, and University of North Georgia for hosting us here. What a great room, great setup, and got the expert in the IT over here, Mr. Devon's taking care of us. But I just really do appreciate that, and he's had a lot of good communication. I know Jeff Hammond, I don't know if Jeff's here yet. There he is, right there, Jeff's out in the back. Jeff and Ben have known each other a long time. We really do appreciate y'all hosting us. Didn't mean to interrupt you, so,
Well, I have nothing more to add. I've been directing the state's construction codes program for the last 20 years. I work closely with the cities and counties, the building officials, and all of the construction industry. It's a good public-private partnership. I could not do it at the state without the construction industry, home builders, architects, engineers, electricians, plumbers, and all the folks that are part of it. Because we work together, they interact with us, and we meet with the same folks y'all meet at the Capitol, the same association representatives and lobbyists. We participate in the process. So it's a great partnership. We work together in keeping the state's construction codes current. Actually, January 1, 2020, 8 of the state mandatory construction codes will be updated, and the state of Georgia will be current with all its construction codes. So we've got one more next year, a couple of the optional codes also to review. So we're here to answer any questions. I know most of the people in the room, they're our friends.
oh, that's good. Like I said, we're all friends. How about making a change in the state code? What type of process do you do if there's a suggestion made, somebody comes up with a thought of how they think to improve that? What kind of process do you go through to study that issue?
I'll give you an example. A few years ago, carbon monoxide came before the legislature. The legislature decided that a carbon monoxide detectors for residential homes should be looked at the tech committee at DCA. So it was sent to us by the legislature, and we set up a subcommittee to review carbon monoxide detectors in single-family homes. We brought in interest groups and folks that would be involved and engaged on that task force. We went through a rigorous process, similar to what you do at the Capitol. You have a committee and a task force and review. And from that, we had a code amendment, and we amended the state's construction code. It takes about a year to change the code, and that we put carbon monoxide detectors became mandatory in all single-family homes at that point, and home builders participated and were part of that process. It takes about a year to adopt a code, a whole code, so you have new residential code, or to adopt an amendment. So it goes through a rigorous review process and participation by many stakeholders.
When there's a change in the International Building Code, what's the process in the state? How long does it take for the state then to adopt whatever changes were made in the International Building Code?
We usually run about 2 to 3 years behind when they do the federal level.
2 to 3 years.
Yes, they adopt the codes at the federal level, national level, ICC. And then sometimes it's good that the codes sit, because it can be things that need to be worked out, or things that need to be changed, or things that aren't working correctly. So we really run about 2 to 3 years behind what is at the national level. But if there's something that comes along prior to our adoption of the next edition, the state has the ability to adopt code amendments, statewide code amendments at any time. And usually
Is that a legislative process, or that's something done at
it's
DCS?
something that's done at DCA. You know, and we all know that we're in the executive branch of government.
Right.
So the legislature, for the most part, has left the code writing and deliberations with DCA and the State Codes Advisory Committee. They have, on occasion through the years, stepped in when they felt necessary and done something legislatively, and then re-implemented the rules. An example was the water wars that we went through and the plumbing changes. Y'all went through and said, we got to do this to satisfy that judicial requirement, and y'all did it legislatively, and then we went and mirrored it in the codes. You also, a few years ago, said that we don't think there should be sprinklers in 1 and 2 family dwellings. We passed something as a legislature prohibiting that, so we had to go and write in the code. We couldn't put sprinklers in 1 and 2 family dwellings. But those are a couple of rare occasions. 95% of the time, the legislature has left it to the executive branch and through the DCA, State Prison Advisory
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How about, the number of people, I guess would you call it a panel, a board that you have that makes those final decisions? They hear testimony or look at information or gather information, and who makes up that board?
It's a 21-member advisory committee. There are 4 representatives from the cities and counties, and they are building officials. There's 2 fire officials, that makes 6. There are 3 state agency departments that have a representative, the Department of Community Affairs, Department of Health. There is, in the Insurance Commissioner's Office, the State Fire Marshal. So 4 building officials, 3 state agencies, 2 additional fire officials. So that's about 11. And then there is it's a 21-member committee. So the other 10 come from the trade associations. We ask the home builders for a rep. We ask the architects for a rep. We ask the engineers, plumbers, electricians, and all of those folks. So it's almost even. I think it's like 1 more private sector person versus a government sector person. So that 21-member advisory committee, which has just been reappointed by the commissioner, they serve 4-year terms. 4-year term, yes. And that is where all the grunt work and stuff. That's like the study committee, it's the technical committee. That's where we have meetings and input and go through the whole process. But then it has to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, and of course we follow the Open Meetings Act and all state laws that go as running state meetings. And then the final step is the DCA board, which of course is appointed by the governor. And they will, sometimes 99% of the times they accept the recommendations of the State Codes Advisory Committee because it's a technical thing. But they're the final check and balance, and then we follow the last step and do all the administrative and following the requirements with the Secretary of State's office.
Are those members term limited to 4 years, or can they be reappointed?
They can be reappointed. They can.
My question on when the board gets an application from a municipality that wants to amend the code, I guess you have 3 options. You can approve it, reject it, or no comment.
Correct.
What would what no comment be? What would that entail? If it's not approved or rejected, why no comment?
Well, you're right. We could either say we agree with that code, local code amendment, we disagree, we could say no comment. Majority of the time we say no comment because the city or county, even if we say no comment, the city or county can go back to their county commission or city council and vote to override that.
So, changing that code, is it like a continuous process, or do you go through a lull? Like you might go, how many years would you go before you actually go in and update the code? I mean, is it always evolving, or is it sometimes as it lapses?
Sometimes there's almost something, I think there's something every year. We just got through a 3-year process where we reviewed 8 codes, and they're all going to affect the first of the year. Now we're beginning the review of 3 more, which will go into effect January 1, 21.
Okay.
But I don't have any code addition on the horizon after that. But what happens in that 1 or 2 years when we're not adopting a code addition is the different groups will look at the code addition that we're not, we usually miss a cycle. Like we're adopting the 18 codes, we want to adopt the 21. A lot of the groups will go and look at the code that we're not adopting, and if they see something in it, they'll bring it forward as a state amendment, which is really a lot easier on the cities and the counties because they don't have to buy all new books or software with the new codes, and we just bring forward what we think is necessary for Georgia.
With the national board, do you serve on any committees on the national building code, or do you attend those meetings, or how does that work? Are we directly tied in Georgia to the national?
We are directly tied in. I attend 2 meetings usually a year on behalf of the state where they have code hearings, so I hear everything at the national level. Then several of our committee members, and I just got back from the conference Southwest, several of our committee members are also there, and a lot of even the lobbyists, the national lobbyists, and even some of the state lobbyists will go. So we hear it all at the national level, and I have sat on committees. I sat on a green construction code committee a few years in the past. So we get it at the national level because the same issues, a lot of the same fighting are to different sides. If they don't get it done there, they come and they try the state.
Maybe instead of fighting, discussion.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm just,
Debate.
no, that's interesting. How long have you been with the department?
20 years.
20 years.
Been in the program 20 years.
Don't go anywhere.
No, I'm not planning to. I'm trying to get to 25.
Okay. Look, there's a quick, let's open it up just a minute. Anybody have a burning question they want to ask? Here's kind of the plan. We're going to make sure we stay on the schedule, and we have, as you can see, we've got a great agenda, front to back. What we were thinking that maybe the panel, of course you got a panel of two up here, would ask some questions, and then at the end, we'd have all the audience. But if we can stay on a pretty good time schedule, I may be able to offer a couple minutes at the end of each presentation. So if you have a burning question, jump on it. We'll ask these guys. If not, we're going to move into the next one and then jot that question down, and we'll circle back. And before we break for lunch, we'll ask the presenters in the morning. If you have any questions, we'll ask them, and then we'll come into the afternoon session and we'll have a different group. So that's kind of the plan. Anybody have anything? Thanks, Chair. Anybody have anything that they'd like to ask Ted, Kyle, while they're up there? All right, guys. Hey, look, y'all got off pretty easy. We're gonna take some good questions and get before
Everybody's just getting warmed up. We anticipate there might be questions, so we're not going to run out. We'll be a couple rows back.
Oh, that's good. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We give from
Yes, sir. You'll hit me out. I can't help you with that.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, we'll go ahead and begin the introductory part of our presentation as this is loaded. My name's Hayden Stanley. We represent and have represented the Georgia Apartment Association for many years. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. Before I introduce Mr. Wall with HR&A Consultants, wanted to give you the title of our comments today, and it is The Myth of Homeownership, How Georgians Enjoy the Mobility, Accessibility, Affordability of Apartment Life. Just kidding, I'm builders. The Georgia Apartment Association, along with the Atlanta Apartment Association and later support with the National Apartment Association, undertook a study of primarily the metro Atlanta region to determine what are the drivers of multifamily housing costs and affordability. This is stated in Atlanta, but what we'll see through the presentation is that these costs, though specific in the metro Atlanta or city of Atlanta area, have the same impact throughout the state, particularly as it applies to the ability of owners to develop and build or to operate and maintain apartment properties on an ongoing basis. Mr. Sam Wall is with us again from HR&A. They are one of the premier consulting firms in the United States, having worked with a number of municipalities, local government, state government, as well as, in our case, the industry. So I'll ask Stan to give a brief introduction, and then we have an abbreviated presentation this morning to the full and complete document that you have before.
Very good.
Good morning. Thank you, Hayden, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleased to be here to talk about housing affordability in Atlanta. By virtue of background, HR&A advises the real estate development economic development advisory firm. We have 5 offices across the country. I'm based in Washington, D.C. Spend a lot of time in the Atlanta area working with clients such as the city itself, Beltline, with MARTA, trying to advance equitable housing development across the city of Atlanta, as well as opportunities for economic development. By virtue of my own background, in the past I've been a developer myself, and developed a mixed-use, mixed-income property in Washington, D.C. That had 25% affordable housing, had LEED Platinum certification, every single possible requirement layered on top of this project. The project was ultimately successful in that I broke even and didn't lose money, but essentially the combined stack of all the different requirements made the project very difficult for implementation. And that's one example from my own background. That's repeated over and over again in the Atlanta market and across the country in terms of making these types of projects work and helping cities to deliver housing for the residents. We worked on the study with Atlanta Apartment Association, Georgia Apartment Association about a year ago, wrapped up earlier this year, looking at trying to dig down and understand exactly what is causing rising cost of housing in metropolitan Atlanta. And through our analysis, through our research, working with a number of developers to understand exactly what it takes to deliver housing, we found a handful of key drivers. First and foremost, population. Atlanta has been the victim of its own success in terms of great economic development, economic growth, but as a result, people want to move there. And during the course of since 2010, there's been a 16% increase in households in the city of Atlanta, in the metropolitan Atlanta region. Again, driving up the demand for housing in terms of people who want to be there. A trend that's impacting Metro Atlanta as well as the entire country has been a dramatic increase in construction costs. And we've seen 80% increase in construction costs since 2000. Both labor as well as materials are driving that cost increase for construction. The third area, which is very relevant to the committee and municipalities across the state, is policies related to assessments, building permits, community exactions, community benefits, other added costs. All these directly impact the cost to construct or operate apartments. As much as 20% increase in rent based on 6 hypothetical policies, and I'll walk through this a little bit later, in terms of the effect of these stacked policies and how they actually drive up rents on apartments. And then finally, looking at zoning and historic disparities. Restrictive zoning, largely around single-family homes, make it difficult to actually deliver multifamily development in large parts of the Metro Atlanta area. And looking at that region, 89% of land in North Atlanta is zoned exclusively for single-family. And this is largely where a lot of the job centers are. And it's difficult to possible to build multifamily units in that part of the region. We always start with looking at data and analysis to underlie our approach to these types of challenges. And one key kind of framework to look at is just understanding the overall relationship between development costs, operating costs, and revenue on a project, and how those are all directly connected to one another. And essentially the overlying message is that the project must earn sufficient rent to cover its operating expenses, including financing costs used to pay for the actual development. Looking at development costs, it's comprised of land, soft costs, and hard costs. Within soft costs is developer profit. And many times people will say, well, greedy developers, can't they just take their profit and reduce the profit? The challenge is that developers have choices. So to the extent that a project can't meet its returns for developer or investor, it won't happen, that developer will go elsewhere. So it's important to understand that dynamic in terms of cost for development. That development cost then drives operating expenses in terms of the cost of financing a project, both debt and equity, as well as the cost of managing the project. That includes property management, operating expenses, real estate taxes, those ongoing expenses that cost to actually keep the project afloat and sustain it over time. Those costs must be covered by project rent, and to the extent they're not, that project will fail, that project will not happen. So again, it's good to understand this framework and really understand the connection between development costs, operating costs, and revenue, because different types of policies impact different areas of this framework, and all of them have the potential to increase rents. Again, looking at the challenge in Atlanta, rising housing costs have been largely the result of the city's success. And it's not something to be ashamed of, it's actually fantastic. And it has been successful in attracting employment and growing its employment base and economic development base. Population in the region has grown significantly, as I mentioned earlier, and it continues to project to continue to increase in the future. The other dynamic is that the population of new residents are actually wealthier than existing residents. And to the extent that additional housing isn't built to support this demand, those new wealthier residents will displace existing residents and drive up the cost of existing homes in that market. And again, looking at the growing wealth is reflected by increasing GDP, growth in high-paying jobs, and growth in average household income in Atlanta. Going back to that original framework, this diagram shows how these different types of policies conspire to increase the cost that must be charged for rent to actually make the project viable. Some example policies that can have this negative impact or increased rent impact include tax increases, through property tax increases, a delay of the project. So to the extent the project has to go through unnecessarily long community improvement and approvals or permitting process, delayed project of 6 months adds time and adds cost to that project's development. Increases in impact fees, whether it's stormwater fees or other kinds of impact fees, again, adds on to that development cost and this adds on to the required rent necessary to make the project viable. Municipal utility leakages fees, this can be stormwater fees, water connection fees, all fees related to actually connecting into the infrastructure. Again, it's another cost that adds to development costs that ultimately drives up the difficulty in building and producing housing. Community exactions, and these could be things such as other investments in community benefits or other non-project expenses. Again, add to development costs and add to difficulty in making the project viable. And finally, if you look at zoning policy, to the extent that a developer is not able to build to its ideal capacity, you're reducing density by 12%, once again, reducing the viability of that project, and impacts the ability not to be viable. To be viable, that project has to build at a higher level of rents. And again, the collective impact of this hypothetical model has $500 to a $500 rent. And this is a 20% increase in the cost of this particular hypothetical unit. And again, the key here is understanding the collective impact of these types of policies on the production of housing.
What time frame are you looking at there? That increase, you got a year's time, or in that 7-year time frame?
I don't remember the time frame of the model. This is just one. There's a hypothetical case study that we built off of the developer pro forma and essentially looked at between the development period as well as stabilization, the total cost impact of those policies.
How is Atlanta in comparison to other cities our size? I'm a rural guy, but I'll say our size in Atlanta. How does that compare?
The policies are similar, but there's a number of cities and states that have actually enacted ways to counter these policies. So one recent example is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where citywide they adopted the elimination of single-family zoning. So that particular city, you can now build triplexes across the entire city, and that's one way of relieving kind of the constraint of production in that particular city. In other areas, such as Washington, D.C., they've been going through a process of revising their comprehensive plan. And again, looking for ways to reduce impediments to development, and largely the type of development the city wants and needs to generate affordable housing and generate multifamily housing that again is desperately needed in that particular city, largely through ways as zoning relief and density relief around transit areas, again to enable people who do want to build density and multifamily near transit to do so more quickly and more easily than going through a special exception or planning and development process that creates risk and slows down the development process in that particular city. And there's a number of examples across the country of different cities employing these types of tools to help advance these types of policies and reduce the impact of these types of constraints. I mentioned earlier the challenge in the metro Atlanta area of zoning and land use. One key issue is that the demand for apartments is concentrated largely in the north of the city, where a lot of the larger employment centers are located. The challenge is that a lot of those areas actually have difficult zoning for single-family zoning, multifamily, or other means of constraining the ability to build multifamily development in those communities. Areas that do have supportable rents, again, are supported or zoned for single-family development. The challenge is that there are areas that do support multifamily, largely in the south part of the city, where it's far away from employment centers. In those parts of the city, the rents that can be commanded don't support the development of multifamily housing. So we have a mismatch in terms of where zoning allows multifamily, where the job centers are, where people prefer to live, compared to where it's possible to build multifamily, build density, and make it a viable project. So one challenge is how do we actually relieve some of those constraints in terms of zoning and land use to enable the production of housing closer to job centers, which also has the unintended benefit of reducing congestion, and reducing the need for people to travel across the entire region to be able to afford housing and get to their jobs that might be across the city. And again, the takeaway from this slide is that multifamily development can only occur where zoning is supported and also where market feasibility aligns. To the extent there's a mismatch, you won't have the ability to deliver multifamily units. Coming out of this analysis, and again, you have a much longer version on your desk, we looked at 5 recommendations. The first recommendation is understanding the impact of municipal policies on the viability of housing production, and looking at the cumulative impact of those policies, not just one-off policy decisions, but looking at the total effect of controlled basket of policies and how that impacts the ability to deliver and produce housing in that region. Increasing supply. And this is largely a part of zoning. We're looking for more supportive zoning to allow for multifamily and density to build in those areas that are experiencing most growth and demanding housing closer to job centers. Streamlining permitting. The ability to entitle a project to construction sooner than later has the ability to reduce costs by reducing delays in the project. Committing resources and looking at preserving existing affordable housing and subsidizing the creation of new affordable housing. To make these projects viable due to the current state of construction costs and the other policy-related costs, it's difficult to make deals pencil. So almost any developer is building at the top of the market because that's where they can actually make the project viable. To the extent that the city or the region or the state wants to foster the creation of mixed-income housing, looking for opportunities to, one, preserve what exists today, but also ways to identify funding to provide a subsidy to enable those types of projects that are building rent-rate housing or high-end housing to build at lower levels of income and affordability. And then finally, looking at evaluation of tax incentives, looking at ways that through tax abatements or other tools that we can offset the cost of production of housing, that again ultimately results in increased supply.
Take that last one, for example, again, are there cities across the United States that are using the tax incentives?
Again, I'll use my home city of Washington, D.C. They use tax abatements very frequently. Either tax abatements or tax increment financing are two of the most frequently used tools in that city as a way of mitigating or increasing development feasibility and mitigating the impact of affordable housing production in that city.
State incentive or local or both?
DC is complicated. It's a state/city, but it's essentially it varies by state. In other areas, it's local incentives at the county level or city level impact or implementing those tax abatement programs.
In Georgia, if I could, in Georgia, there are tax abatement and tip programs at the local level, and there's a state tax credit for multifamily housing. I know, Chairman Corbett, you're familiar with some of the tax lawsuits over how that revenue should be considered in terms of property assessments.
That's it.
Okay, be glad to answer questions again. We'd encourage you to look through this. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. One thing I want to say following the DCA presentation, we certainly, the apartment industry intersects with state government in so many different ways and so many different departments. And I have to say that the way that DCA administers their code process, it's inclusive, it is methodical, it's done over time, and they make good decisions generally. But I just wanted to compliment their process and those who run it to you, because they really, they've got it right at DCA. A couple of specific items that I thought I would, I'd ask the Apartment Association to provide us with a couple of examples of local policies that, whether they're great policies or you disagree with their greatness, they impact the cost of providing housing, whether you're building it or whether you have existing property underway. And the first, Michael Paris earlier in Athens spoke about inclusionary zoning policies. And so inclusionary zoning policies are essentially saying on any new zoning or any new project that requires a different zoning, there has to be a set aside, a certain percent of those units provided at a lower rent level. And in some cases, that inclusionary zoning policy will provide incentives like tax abatements or density bonuses or other things. And in other cases, regrettably, there's just the mandate of cutting out a percent of those units that have to be rent capped. And there's certainly differing opinions about whether that's even legal. However, those policies have been adopted in a couple of areas. One, City of Atlanta has done an overlay district around their belt line, and then there's a west side piece as well. And they have some abatement, some tax abatement policy to go with it. But in the case of one, as I understand it, the tax abatement lasts 10 years, but the affordability mandate lasts 20. So that's not always going to, when we go back to the drawing table to map out, pencil out a deal, it's going to work or it's not. Because as Stan pointed out, and others have, developer could just go elsewhere, will. In the city of Brookhaven, they've adopted a inclusionary zoning. Apparently there are 0 incentives attached to that. So what you see is a significant slowdown on the production of housing. And maybe that's part of the plan to stop apartment properties from coming in. We're certainly no strangers to NIMBYism and to community opposition to multifamily housing. That's part of life in this world. One thing about the Beltline inclusionary zoning that I failed to mention is you can buy your way out of those set aside lower rent units with an in lieu fee ranging from $130,000 to $187,000 per unit. So you can go ahead and pay ahead and then just do a free market approach to your housing. So while these communities that have adopted things like inclusionary zoning are trying to address the issue of affordability, and that's one policy that they've taken approach. They also stack other policies on top of that can increase cost. The city of Atlanta, for example, in 2017 passed local legislation, local ordinances rather, that require that every new commercial or multifamily apartment development provide electric vehicle charging infrastructure for 20% of the parking spaces. And the cost of that, checking with different developers in the city, they have a pretty wide array of what that is costing them. But on the low end, property that typically would, or a company rather, that typically does this type of thing in any event, said that cost impact is $2,500 per parking space, because 20% of the spaces have to be built out for this. And those who have not done it and are looking at it have given us the cost of $10,000 per space. So there's certainly efficiencies to be found on the high end, but that is an added cost. And EV charging stations are wonderful. The residents of these apartment communities ask for it. It's something that is provided. It's a reality of today's market, today's urban properties for sure. But here you're putting a rent cap on units and you're driving up the cost for this item. And where does that stack in priorities of affordability? So those types of things happen. We'd be glad to provide more. We wanted to give you a small representation. Interestingly, Chairman Corbett, you advocated and successfully shepherded House Bill 876 through the legislature a couple of years ago. And the result of that in one metro city was to instantly put in a moratorium for a year on multifamily properties, and then lifted that moratorium as they provided new requirements that go along with wood frame construction. So mandating sprinklers on all balconies, increased fire protection ratings, the dwelling unit walls and floors, all exit enclosures, doors, corridor walls, and mandate that all cooktops are equipped with suppression systems. So that has certainly been a way to move around the wood frame construction issue. They also, that same community, went in to adopt recently new requirements on existing buildings. And those these are additional fire requirements above state mandates. Have the insertion of stovetop fire suppression in every unit. Intumescent paint on any exposed and untreated wood surface, and several other items. They were good in that they're allowing, if the property does not sell or change ownership, there's up to 7 years to implement that. For the cost, one member recently told the association that cost is going to be more than $100,000. So that shows up at a real estate transaction and trying to sell it. It impacts the bottom line of that property. So again, some of these policies, communities decided are important and they want to continue it, but it has an impact on affordability.
The ordinance you were talking about, did that have to go through, any of those have to go through DCA at all, or that's just something local and they don't have to do that?
I would need to defer to DCA if they're in the room because they're fire ordinances rather than construction code. I don't know that they do. Somebody, Penny, you know if that had to go through the.
The one with the operating properties, in my understanding, is not with data. I don't know about the additional fire code construction.
A lot of the fire code stuff is in the state fire marshal. He has his own rules and regs, so.
All right, so we're gonna, get anything else?
Any quick questions? Burning questions?
Thank y'all.
Thank you very much for this time.
Hey, thank y'all very much. Just to give everybody a heads up, next we're gonna have, the mortgage bankers come up, and right after that, we'll have Mr. Frank Norton Jr. come up, and then Lester Sewell's gonna come up. That's the next three in line. And, yes, ma'am?
What was the House bill that he was referring to about?
Keep in mind, anybody need an agenda? Anybody come in late needs an agenda while Mo's coming up?
We get partials, where can we get copies of that?
Justin is, recording everything, and you can go on the Georgia House of Representatives website and you can pull it up there. That's a great question. Anybody else need an agenda while we're up here? We need one back here in the back.
I'm gonna lay these on the table. We'll leave them on the table.
Okay, we're glad to have you here with us. I'm gonna just turn it over to Mo Thrash. Everybody in the room plus everybody in Georgia knows Mo Thrash, so I'm gonna turn it over to Mo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't tell you what a great honor it is to be with the two top-notch legislators. We appreciate the opportunity. We represent the Mortgage Bankers Association of Georgia, which is a trade association comprised of mortgage lenders, mortgage brokers, and affiliate members, title insurance companies, for example. So we are implementation of mortgage lending in this state, comprised all over this state. We comprise of lenders, brokers, and affiliate members, like I said, for example, title insurance companies. This morning, we're going to have two representatives from the mortgage bankers speak to you. Maureen Bossert, she's with the credit union, Penn Fed Credit Union. She's president of our state association. Rick Darlington is the past president with Brand Mortgage. He's a regional manager, has branches all over this state. And we're going to hear today talk about what is a qualified loan and how do you qualify for a loan? Is adequate housing available in this state? You know, the state, we're big on bringing businesses into our state, but where are we getting the employees, the workers? Do they have to travel 2, 3, 4 counties to get to work, to qualify for a loan, to own their own property? It's a major concern. Internet, broadband, is it available in this state? Well, we use it in the process of mortgage lending. It's a major problem. So we're here today to address adequate workforce housing throughout this state. How do you qualify for it? Is it available? These two experts are going to talk about that, and we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Maureen?
Thank you. Thank you for letting us speak today. We're honored to be
You
here.
gotta speak up, Maureen. I don't have my hearing aid in over here, so,
Okay, I'll talk louder.
talk loud, just talk loud.
So I'm Maureen Bozard. I'm currently president of the Mortgage Bankers Association of Georgia. And I'm going to talk about qualifying for a mortgage. There's plenty of funds available, so banks lending is not an issue. It's the actual qualifying. And the restrictions we have are federal restrictions, but what's coming rather rapidly in changes will affect a lot of people in the state of Georgia and how they qualify. So first thing I want to say, the Department of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we call it CFPB, I don't know if everyone's familiar with them. When they put some regulations in place, one of the big ones that they put in place was qualified mortgage and ability to repay. And with that, it meant that you had a debt-to-income ratio of 43%. What's wrong with that is a lot of people exceed that 43% for many reasons. They're very credit-worthy, but they just exceed that 43%. So what they put in place was this thing called, we call it a patch. It was just a workaround so we could make loans to people, credit-worthy people who were above that 43%. The regulation said that they had to go through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, be run through their automatic underwriting systems, and received an approved eligible with that debt-to-income ratio of, say, a 47. And that we could still make the loan, it would still be considered a qualified mortgage. So that was good. The issue is the patch is going to expire. It's going to expire. It was a temporary fix. It was there for either 7 years or while Fannie and Freddie were in receivership, whichever came first, and the 7 years is coming first, so it will expire January 2021. If that actually does expire, there's a lot of people that we're not going to be able to make loans for because we'll be stuck at that 43 debt to income ratio. Just as an idea from last year's production, last year there was approximately 1 million loans for $260 billion that exceeded the 43 debt to income ratio. Now, that's across the country, but it will have a definite impact here in Georgia. So, so we're working really hard to make sure that that does not expire or to come up with a fix that the CFPB can live with. We're lobbying for this and trying to make sure that we can get this taken care of. The second part of some of the regulations that the CFPB put in place for us was, we call it Appendix Q, which doesn't mean anything to you guys. That's just where they house these regulations, so we just know about it. Appendix Q is where they keep all the regulations about how we qualify our borrowers, how we use their income to qualify. It allows us to use certain income and not use certain income. So in a lot of households, a lot of borrowers might have maybe a second job, but there's rules around when we can use that income. So they really might not be over that 43. We just cannot qualify with all the income we know about. An example would be also, maybe someone's moving here for a new job. The only way we could use that income of the job that they're moving here for is if they had a non-revocable employment contract, which doesn't really happen that often. So that would be the only way. So if they hadn't started the job, they'd have to move here, get an apartment, and then when they're actually on the job, then move again to the home they want to buy. So it's just little restrictions like that that are keeping us from making loans to people that we want to move. So again, that's one of the other things that we're really trying to get changed that can have a big effect on how many people we can qualify in the state of Georgia. These rules typically tend to affect the low to median income families more. So we do have challenges when Rick brings in what we're seeing in the trends of housing. You can see where these two, the qualifying and then what we're seeing in housing, kind of play together and have a huge effect on us being able to put qualified borrowers on the houses. I have, all my data came from MBA, National MBA, and I can get this to you if you wanna see it. It's 31 pages, so I don't know if you want to look at that, but it has a lot of data into what this is all about and the different options that we're proposing to fix it. Again, it's gonna be crucial that we do get this fixed before it expires. So, and then Rick will,
What is the median income in Georgia, you know?
well, it varies by county. Rick has that data.
Yep, I have a little bit of that. If you look at North Fulton, just North Fulton County, the area median income is $79,200. If you look at what we would qualify as low to moderate income, it's $63,360. So we do use these, and very low income is $39,600. So we use these numbers a lot when it comes to affordable housing with our down payment assistance programs. So DCA, we use Georgia Dream a lot. They're income-based, household income-based. So a lot of these numbers come into factor with them. We have other programs as well through the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta that has down payment and grant programs that allow you to help with the money that you need for down payment assistance. Both of these have different rules in qualifying for income purposes. And typically they're going to give somewhere between around $5,000 as a down payment assistance that can go towards the down payment and or closing costs. Depending on the program, it's either as a silent second mortgage or it's going to be forgivable over a period of time from that. And each down payment assistance program is going to have their own set of rules of how that works. Most of them also have special programs for teachers, first responders, nurses that are going to increase that from $5,000 to $7,500. And then also some of the hardest hit funds that we've had, there's 3 counties left in Georgia, but I think still being one of them. You can get up to $15,000 for down payment assistance through the Georgia Dream. So, but that becomes very important because typically through FHA, you're looking at a minimum of 3.5% down on a purchase of a home. And if we look at that as an example of what can happen in North Fulton County. So, and I'm sure Frank Norton's going to talk about this more, just the availability of houses and the lack of inventory that we've got. But if you look at in North Fulton County, if we used a low to moderate income of $63,000, you're going to have 28% of that income is what we're going to use for housing purposes. So as Maureen was talking about, you can have a debt income ratio maximum of 43%, but we want the housing to be concentrated on 28%. And that's going to comprise of your mortgage, your interest, your taxes, your homeowner's insurance. Homeowner's insurance, of course, we do HOA fees. And if it's a condo or townhomes, then they have additional fees on top of that. So if you're looking at North Fulton, again, you're going to have the income of $63,360. 28% of that is $17,740 a year, and divided that, it's $1,478 a month that you can spend towards housing. Based on that info, we need to find a home approximately $215,000 would be the max that they could purchase under that scenario. That doesn't take into account their car loans, their student loans, credit card debt, anything else that's going to come into play.
And that's where that patch would come in. If they go over that 43, we're cut off at that.
And most of the issues we're seeing from that is just not only the car payment, student loan debt is a big issue for qualifying. It's really one of the bigger factors that we have. Credit scores are fine, the availability of funds are okay, but it's the debt to income ratios that come into play. So, but for the purpose of this, you're looking at $1,478 a month, which is roughly a $215,000 house. That person's still going to have 3.5% of that $215,000 for down payment. They can either get that through their own funds, a loan against their 401k if they have one. They can also get it as a gift or through Georgia Dream and Federal Home Loan Bank. But that all adds to the cost of your loan and what you can afford. The bigger issue is when we're talking about affordability is the number of houses available in that price range. So just off of the internet that we looked at, in North Fulton alone, they had six homes currently for sale for under $215,000 for low income housing or affordable housing.
So that would mean these borrowers now have to move a county or two away, and now they're part of driving down 85 and
Yeah, so that's when you start seeing why do people drive till they qualify? Why are they moving 2 or 3 counties over? It's because they can't find a $215,000 house, or they don't afford a $215,000 house, so they're driving into other counties to be able to get there. And then what you get more rural with that, the other obstacle that we have from a lending perspective is the lack of internet, as Mo was mentioning. So that is a big deal. As we had some regulatory changes over the last few years, most of our documents that we send are electronic. We can certainly do so through the mail, but it totally changes the path of how that mortgage goes through the process, the timing of it, and whether or not that borrower can even close within a 30-day time frame. Because we have to allow 7 days for that to get. If I'm mailing you a package, then I've got to allow 7 days for you to get it and to be able to return it back to you so I can prove that you signed it. Everything on a national and a local basis is going to be internet and electronic based, from delivering our documents, from you filling out applications, from us pulling your credit, from us giving you quotes and estimates for a mortgage. The whole, from beginning to end, is all going to be electronic based. And so these rural counties that have little access to internet or slow internet really slows down that process or even prevents that process for them. So you can kind of see how all this ties in together. I mean, it's the QM patch that we need to have fixed. We're going to need more availability for internet, and then we also just need more inventory, the affordability of homes. And I'm not sure how much that's really going to change. And again, I don't know what Frank's going to talk about, but I would imagine from the real estate side, that's certainly going to be the topic of conversation.
How do we do that? No problem.
How long do we have for that? It's that's
You
not
got
an
2
easy.
more minutes.
2 more minutes. Yeah, that's.
I think some of the things that is again going through the CFPB with the changes that we proposed on easing up. Let us use some of that income that we know is there. Many households do have the second income that we just can't use, or work with us on this cash and don't cut us off at 43, because they don't take into consideration that maybe this person was paying rent, was paying $1,600 a month for rent, and now they can get into a house for $1,400, but unfortunately their back integration is going to go above that 43, so we can't do the financing on it when they're actually improving their situation. But that's not what's looked at. It's not looked. Things aren't looked at in that type of it makes sense type of thing. So I think also when we are looking at higher debt to income ratios, I think home buyer education is crucial. We could have maybe they could be part of the solution, make sure they understand what they're getting into and can afford it better and they know what they're looking for. I think there's a lot of potential solutions out there. It's just making sure that the right ones are chosen so we don't have any unintended consequences down the line, as we've seen with so many other things that have happened.
So a lot of that I think ties into again with the inventory, which more ties into right now it's because it's a seller's market. There's just fewer people buying. One of the things that needs to be addressed is the student loan debt crisis. The amount of money that we may find somebody who can afford it, stable job, stable credit. But their student loan debt is just astronomical to get through college, and then that kicks them out of being able to go and buy a starter home or first-time home. So then they end up living in your basement, not getting out, renting apartments, all the different things that go with that.
And different agencies look at student loan debt differently. So some say if it's deferred, we don't have to count it. Some say no, you have to figure out what the payment would still count it. So there's a lot that goes on in the student loan world and how we have to qualify borrowers on that.
How long has it been, the ratio been set at 43%?
Since 2012,
What was it before then?
it was whatever you received when you ran it through your automatic underwriting systems.
Part of Dodd-Frank, is that?
It is.
So you could have somebody who's got stable income, high credit, who has a history of paying things with higher debt that would get approved. Somebody who's got less stable income and lower credit is not going to get that same approval.
I don't necessarily agree that our debt to income should be over 50 or, maybe just going up to a 45, would satisfy it. But, what's the difference between somebody at a 43 and somebody at a 45? It's not that big of a difference. It really isn't. To say that, oh no, you can't, or even if it's 1.0 to say that they can't have housing. And again, you have to look at, do they show the ability to save money during this time? Do they show the ability to, were they paying higher before? You have to look at the whole picture. You can't just look at that number and say, nope, you can't have a house.
One other question, the low to median income was 63,000, is that right?
Yeah, so North Fulton, the area median income was 79,200. Low to moderate was 63,360, and then low income was 39 cents.
What's the starting salary of a teacher?
depends on the
They have
county and the
stipends.
district, but I would
I'm
I
sure
would
they
say
have stipends too, that's why.
$30,000 to $40,000.
And even if you look at police officers, we're on the same thing, $40,000. So if you had a police officer and a teacher in Fort County, and they could live there. It'd be very difficult, unless they go to an apartment, which, I don't know, they're so good.
Hey, you got one. All right, any burning questions in the audience right now? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, I used to be in the mortgage industry, so I find it's been a long time. But are you saying that we don't have discretionary, it's not discretionary upon the underwriter to go on ahead and exceed those limits? Because it always was discretionary on the owner. So now what you're saying is that when you can justify compensating factors, then the underwriter does not have the discretion to go on ahead and exceed the guidelines.
That's correct. And most of that is through, we get into the secondary market, and
Yeah,
it's mortgage-backed
right.
securities,
Right,
and
right.
everything's got to fit that little envelope so that you can sell it. So you couldn't have a loan that Maureen said, oh, I like that, it's a good loan, I'll do it at 51%, and somebody else say, no, I can't do that. And then it gets into disparate treatment, it's not level across all lending fields, and it's not going to be accurate when it gets to the mortgage-backed security area.
But what about your alternative lending packages, like, and I hate to say both by right now, because of course Bank of America was one of the ones that were guilty of a lot of.
Nowadays, that's called non-QM. We
Right,
can't use
so it's not qualified.
we can't use the previous words, which were subprime and things like
Yeah,
that. They're
right.
forbidden to say anymore.
Oh,
So they're
really?
called non-QM loans,
Okay.
and those are available, but it's outrageously priced.
And
So
they're not
these
gonna-
people are gonna pay so much higher to have a non-QM loan.
Right.
And they're not going to be anything for affordable housing.
No.
So they're more geared for people who have some sort of challenge for qualifying, whether it be self-employed or a bankruptcy or a foreclosure, but they're going to have credit, income, they're going to have a down payment to be able to put down.
Yeah,
So
those
they're
are
not
required at
doing
least
the-
20% down.
They're not doing like the 125,
No,
credit
no.
qualifying, that kind of
It's
thing.
long gone.
But you still, for lower income, can get USDA loans.
Yes, that is
Right?
correct. In their market.
Okay, so and they have their own.
Settlements, yes. But it's 100% financing within that market.
Right, right,
Within their market until they run out of funds. and then-
right. And then it just needs to be reauthorized.
All right, so y'all gonna be around a little while?
Yes, we can speak.
Okay. Anybody thinks of something else they want to add? Mo?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point this out to you. A majority of what they're talking about qualified loans are federal guidelines. And our federal representatives up in Washington will be making those decisions, not you and your study committee. But it's great information of how our people have to qualify for a loan, and what they have to go through.
That's what John and I were just saying, too bad, out of all those items you fill in, there's not a line, number 7, that says character of the person. There's a lot of people in these small rural communities know the people that are coming in for the loan, and they can't get it, and they know they're good for it, but they don't fit the
Even
criteria.
though these are federal, we want to make you aware of it because it is going to have a huge impact on Georgia should this not go through.
No doubt, so that's what we need to work our Congress.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. All right, we got Mr. Frank Norton coming up, right after that, Rusty Sewell, and then we'll jump over on the back page here, probably after lunch. Jeff. Jeff Lefford.
Frank.
Jeff Lefford, you introduce yourself.
Sure, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm Jeff Ledford, I'm with the Georgia Realtors, but I wanted to thank Frank Norton Jr. for coming out. He's the president of the Norton Agency that has been around almost as long as the Georgia Realtors have been in existence. So you may have seen some of their signs on the way in. They're very active up here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak from here. I don't do real well sitting down. I move too much. Good? We're good? We're on screen? Perfect. Perfect. This is sort of a presentation that I've given to a number of folks. I am, my brother and I own what today is the largest privately owned insurance real estate company in the state of Georgia. It's 91 years old, and I am a real estate investor. I'm a real estate developer. I'm a real estate contractor. I have a degree in building construction from Georgia Tech. I'm a real estate broker. We're the largest manager of real estate in Northeast Georgia. I'm a research junkie, and you will see that, and I am part-time Baptist preacher. And my
Let's start with that, Frank, let's start with that.
I'm a Methodist preacher, and I have been preaching affordable housing. I have been preaching affordable housing for a better part of 35 years. To sometimes a forest full of insensitive trees. So I'm going to share with you a little bit. First, those of you who have heard me, I am Frank, and I step on lots of toes, and I pre-apologize. I am Frank 24/7. So just let's look at the conundrum that we have. For every 2 jobs we are recruiting into the state of Georgia, we have to provide a rooftop somewhere, where it's an apartment, where it's a mobile home, where it's a single-family house. And so when a city like Commerce recruits SK and they bring 2,000 jobs, they're going to have 1,000 rooftops somewhere in City Commerce, or surrounding counties, or surrounding counties, or surrounding counties to be able to import that labor. And much of what we do in terms of industrial recruitment is bring these big industries, but no one really thinks about the unintended consequence. And I mentioned Commerce because over the last 6 months, the city of Commerce has turned down every single multifamily rezoning that's been presented in front of them because they don't want multifamily, which means they caught the car but don't really know what to do with it, and they are protective of the school system, which does not have the capacity to take care of the massive influx of employees they're going to get. Affordable housing. Since 2007, 75% of all builders evaporated. Many of them are inspectors, many of them have gone into the mortgage business, have gone to a lot of different things, but they have evaporated, and they are not coming back. We have a shortage of at least 350,000 houses, where the average new home has increased 42% in the state of Georgia since 2010. That's the entire state. The regulation, and I'll show you in a minute some numbers, the regulation has added 30 to 55%. Some of it is regulation to slow down growth, and some of it is just inherent organic growth of cost. And most towns across Georgia have a 3-month supply of houses or less. Real quickly, I look at the state in 3 sections. There's the center core of the 5 counties of Atlanta. There's the 17-corner region around Atlanta, and then the rest of the state of Georgia. Atlanta is that core is 37 million. Sorry, 3.7 million. Outer ring is 2.2, 2.3. And the rest of Georgia is 4.5. So you can start to see the scale of what we're having to deal with. If we look at the annual growth rate, the outer ring is growing faster than any of those others. If we look at the average age, it has a higher average age than the city of Atlanta, all those millennials moving in downtown, and it roughly is the same as the rest of the state of Georgia. If we look at the college 4-year, I just picked a number, 4-year college graduate, Metro Atlanta is 26%, 19% in the outer ring, and 13% in the rest of the state of Georgia. You can start to see the disparity that we're seeing across the state. Average income, $92,000 in that inner core, $89,000 on that outer ring, but $64,000 for the rest of the state of Georgia. Now that also includes the second largest MSA, which is Augusta, and then Columbus, or then Savannah, then Columbus, and then Macon. All of those higher incomes have all bled into that 64,000 number, pushing that up. So if you're really looking at rural Georgia, it is a much lower number outside of the metro area. Annual housing starts. This is start to see the bifurcation that we're seeing in the marketplace. There are 10,000 housing starts in Atlanta, Georgia over the last 12 months, but there were 14,000 in that outer ring. That's where folks are migrating. And 9,000 for the rest of the 142 counties. Pretty amazing number that we're not seeing more construction. And that 9,000 is the units in Statesboro because of the student housing. It's the units in Athens. It's the units in Savannah. It's the retirement homes that we're seeing in Valdosta. If we were to take the urban areas, then we're probably less than 1,500 housing starts in all the rest of the counties that are not urban. and then vacant developed lots. We used to have 250,000 vacant developed lots in the state of Georgia. 160,000 of it in that inner ring, inner core, and outer ring of Atlanta, and we really have been absorbing those lots at a rapid pace. If you look at the fastest growing cities, in that inner core, that's Chamblee, Norcross, and Clarkston, and then Savannah or Wentworth, Brazelton, Flowery Branch, and Woodstock on that outer ring, and the rest of them are in Savannah or Augusta. So this is, from the governor's website, what my staff is taking all of the announcements that are 100 employees or greater in the state of Georgia since 2007. What we're trying to do is to figure out where they are. This may be an industry that has added some more space and hired 100 or more, or someone newly relocated in. And what's fascinating is if you were to draw a straight line up Georgia 400 and across Highway 20, 43% of all of those are in one quadrant, northeast quadrant of the state of Georgia. Yes, we have Savannah. Yes, we have, and Savannah is pretty light because much of what we've got is distribution, which is light employment based. We have some heavy over in the Columbus area because of the Kia and the automobile industry. If we were to look at the Alabama side, there are 4 times the number of stars on the Alabama border because of our Kia plant. We also have some supercharged Georgia investments. SK is building a $1.6 billion plant in commerce. Facebook is building somewhere close to a $42 billion computer brain in Covington, very low employment. Switch Data Center, that is Google in Douglas, their commitment is $2.5 billion. Caterpillar and Bogart, $500 million. Kia, West Point, $1.2 billion, but it has all of those other industries around it. Baxter, $1 billion. And then the Georgia ports. Georgia ports is probably estimated is most likely $40 billion worth of activity in and around that market. Each of those are job markets. Each of those are trying to recruit, and each of those have unsettling effects, unintended consequences on affordable housing. We'll get to that in a second. So future industrial growth, and this is also housing-based. There is 4.5 million square feet of space under construction on the I-85 corridor. There's 14.1 million square feet of space proposed. In the Savannah area, another 10 million square feet proposed, 5.2 million square feet under construction, and 2.1 million square feet of industrial space in Columbus area. This is Georgia housing. This is over the last, since 2000, this is the differences between those three. And I think you're making these presentations available. So, in the 1970s, the state of Georgia permitted 275,000 houses. In the 80s, 436,000. In the 90s, 518,000. In the 2000s, 654,000. I will point out that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution said we will never be able to sell all of those houses. They're full. They're gone. And they're now appreciating at the clip of 5% a year or greater. And then, but from 2000 to 2018, we've only permitted 285,000 single-family houses. We are 300,000 or more short of housing. And in the state of Georgia, 430,000 short. It's an amazing number. Amazing number. If you look at where the average price house, in 2011, we were still being prices were still being affected by an overhang of foreclosures. The average price in the state of Georgia was $162,000. According to our records, the average price in 2018 is $301,000. Most of the houses are trading in the metro Atlanta area, the inner ring and outer ring, which is pushing that number out. People are staying put in the rural areas. So we're not seeing that overhousing. That's a major move. That is the indictment against affordable housing. So average price home in Atlanta, it was $323,000. You can see this outer ring, it went from $215,000 to $382,000 in Forsyth County. Forsyth County, since January 1st, Forsyth County has moved to $410,000. The average house sold since January of this year is $410,000. and the other states of Georgia. So we can probably commute from Valdosta in a house for $132,000, but we can't commute that far to a good paying job. Albany is $132,000. You can start to see the effects of some gentrification we see in Savannah and the Athens market. So if we want to look at geography and housing patterns, this is the hot spots in the state of Georgia that we've determined where we're seeing multifamily outside of Metro Atlanta. Again, this is not a Metro Atlanta. This is active adult retirement, which is driven by healthcare. And so in the Valdosta area, Brunswick and Savannah, a little bit of retirement, but also active adult. But this is the migration of active adult and retirement communities. This is the second home pattern that we've seen for the better part of 50 years. Mountain cabins in the woods, not necessarily mansions in the mountains any longer, cabins in the woods, and some sort of beach or recreation. I want to speak of this. This is modular housing or industrialized housing, which is mentioned before. If we have had an opportunity to go to a niece's wedding in Hilton Head, and I decided to go cross-country back to Gainesville in February, and I never went on a major road. I just crisscrossed. My wife thought I was crazy, but I was really interested in seeing what was happening between there and here. And one of the things that I noticed was in the smaller towns, whether it's Dublin or some of the even smaller towns, the mobile home lots were full. Mobile home lots were full, and I know enough about my friend Butch Miller teaches me about cars, and what he does is Milton Martin Honda, if you want to buy a car. And a car dealer has a lot full when they're busy, when they're selling cars, and when you're not selling cars, the lot is empty. Same thing with mobile home manufacturers, and these are slack full. They are 5 feet apart. They are stacked as like cordwood across whatever land that they have. Mobile homes, it occurred to me, or housing in the outlying areas of the state of Georgia has defaulted to manufactured housing because we lost all of the builders. If Metro Atlanta lost 75% of the builders, Tifton probably lost 95% of the builders. And so we still have that organic growth of people wanting to buy houses, and we also have we have the instance where we sold a house in Gainesville to a young guy who was 38, who was right now 30 years old. His dad came up with the down payment. They paid $195,000 for the house. Dad came up with a 40% down payment, and he was the bank and loaned him the balance. When I asked him why he did that, he said, I would have even paid more to get him out of my basement. And that's what we have for those that can't afford that. But the son by himself couldn't qualify. So I believe that we're seeing modular housing, the housing industry for the rest of the state of Georgia default to modular or industrialized construction. And we're going to have to deal with that on a code basis. So I won't go through that slide. That's mobile homes. Geography patterns. This is what's happening in Atlanta, Georgia. This is single-family house sales from 2006 to 2008. This is the first half of 19. It's also done by price point. The blue is houses under $150,000. The red are 250 and under. So just look at those two numbers. The little green bars are the big boy, big girl houses over $750,000, which is increasing. But I'm concerned with this diminishing set of blue, which is the actual number of houses that sold in Metro Atlanta in all of those counties, both inner ring and outer ring. But if we look at the inventory, this is that bubble that we saw in 2006 construction, eating away at the construction, and then we see foreclosures. Those basically disappear, but now look at the inventory of houses, same color scheme, inventory of houses of a house under $150,000. versus the demand of that same number. The inventory of houses that are under $250,000 in value and the demand for that product. And this is months of supply in Metro Atlanta. And so even at 750, statistically, we only have an 8-month supply of homes. In every single case, the black line represents 2018 sales. The yellow line represents the active number of listings. This is at the end of 2018. You can see the disparity between inventory and demand. So let me go back. And we probably today have a 13-minute supply of houses under $150,000. So I did a little math, and this is a little overlap, but it's coming from a different perspective than the mortgage bankers. But this is a quick little formula. You take the hourly wage of an employee, his annual income is roughly 2,060 hours worth of pay. His housing expense is supposed to be, his housing expense, so you're not cost burdened, is 33% of your total income. You may have other debt, you may have other car debt, which gets up to your ratios, but 33% is supposedly the NAR's housing expense. You have utilities and you have your targeted rent. Same thing along with purchase. So let's look at some specific numbers. I am a Kubota welder. In Gainesville, Georgia, I'm making $21 an hour. I am a teacher starting out in Athens. I'm making $21 an hour. I am a technical worker working for the new Baxter plant in Covington. I make $21 an hour. That roughly is $42,840 a year. Housing expense is supposed to be $14,137. My rental and utilities is $1,400, and my targeted rent is $12,724 or $1,000 a month rent. The problem we have is the construction industry is now building, and because of all of those cycles that we talked about an hour ago, we're now seeing average rents go to $13,000, $16,000, $1,800 a month. So, I'm going to buy a house. And actually, the numbers work out pretty well. My total housing expense is the same. My homeowner's expense is supposed to be 25%. That is compared maintenance of the house. That's taxes and insurance. My net housing expense is $10,000. That means I have a monthly payment of $833,000. This is based on a 30-year mortgage, 10% down. Let's say a 5% interest rate, should be lower now, and a 675 credit score, which means that I could buy a house of $183,000. Great. And only have an $883 mortgage payment. The problem with that math is I have to come up with 10% down payment. How am I coming up with a 10% down payment with only making $21 an hour living in an apartment that's overpriced? So we've become squeezed. Or I no longer have a 675 credit score, which means all of those numbers change. The calculus and numbers don't work. So I'm a contractor. I'm going to build a $310,000 house. You'll see why I am in the real estate business. We're going to charge you a 6% real estate commission on the sale of that house. And the Norton Agency makes $18,000. Norton Agency and its agents make $18,600. The construction cost of a 2,600 square foot house at $77 a square foot is $200,000. My lot price, I still were able to buy some lots at $55,000. My interest carry is $6,000. My clearing grading was $15,000. And as a builder for $310,000, I made $15,400. That's why I'm a broker and not building houses. So, where are children going to live? Inner Atlanta is increasing year over year 17%, year over year houses. The outer ring is 19%. The rest of Georgia, roughly 5%. The average price house is $301,000 in the state of Georgia. Is that affordable? Is that attainable? House prices have increased 40%. You got it. House prices have increased 40% since 2008. We currently have statewide, our estimation, of 3.2 months of supply of housing. There's 36.5% influence cost. Let me explain what this is. So I built 10 houses in the city of Gainesville over the last 3 years. 3 years ago. They are 1,300 square feet, 1 and 2 story houses. They are clapboard, hardy plank, tin roofs, porches, and my targeted rent was originally $1,100. I'm a research nut, so I had my accounting staff look at every single cost and split out who made me pay for it. Was it my decision or was it the government's decision? 36.5% of the cost was government attributed. It's things like I grew up in a bedroom which had an electrical outlet on that wall, one on that wall, one on that wall, and one on that wall. Now I have to have them every 6 feet. And I am all for fire safety and I'm all for protection of it. But we've gone crazy because now I have to do it every 6 feet. It's only $55. That's fine. I had 13 more than I would have normally had in a house that's 1,300 square feet times $55. They now require me to no longer have a pull-down string light in a closet. They make me have a closet. It's okay. I've got to have a closet. They now no longer let me have a pull-down string. I have to have a switch on the side of the closet to turn on that switch. You know, that's fine. That's only $165 times the number of closets. It starts to add up with real money, real practicality. So this was the houses that I built. There's a waiting list. I'm now getting $1,600 a month. My pro forma was $1,100 a month with the demand, and there's no place to live. If I were to build a new lot in Forsyth County, it would cost me $45,000 for development costs, plus the land. The Norton Agency manages 300 single-family houses, and as of last week, I had 6 vacancies. There's no room for rentals. And so I have a plan of attack and recommendations. First is I'm going to suggest that every government official turn off Facebook and do the right thing and quit listening to the Facebook bullies and the red shirts. We need to think a long game. Second is we need to bifurcate housing codes. I'm proposing and have been preaching for some time that we need to have some allowances for housing codes if your rental rate is below $1,200 or your home price is below $175. Let the builders who are building that for affordable housing, whatever that is in market to market, have some allowances so we don't have to do those crazy things. I have a crazy one. I have low shallow roofs. You saw I have low shallow roofs. I don't have my heating and air there. I have it under the crawl space. But they required me to pull down they required me to have a pull down stairs to get access to 4 feet of attic that I had nothing in. Once I had the pull down stairs, because I had the pull down stairs, they made me put a flooring of 10 square feet, more than that, about 100 square feet, in and around that hatch. Versus just having a hatch in a closet to be able to access it. $850. Affordable housing ought to have those exchanges. And we ought to have, proposed in the city in Hall County, we have a PRD zoning. Let's have a PRD industrialized housing zone for manufactured housing or industrialized housing that has codes, that has occupancy issue, requires them to have an HOA. They have them in Florida. We ought to look at that because we are defaulting, our construction industry is going to default to industrialized construction. Also, get rid of prejudice. We have prejudice in every community against density, home size, material choice, and construction method. Third, there needs to be economic incentives. I mentioned it earlier, tax allocation districts, but also let's quit giving an SK $30 million worth of tax incentives, carve out 5 to the housing industry in the commerce area. Because you're going to need to provide both of allow auxiliary building units, backyard units, industrialized support housing villages, and change housing expectations. I think we've got to change my children's housing expectations. They're not going to grow up in the same house that I grew up. And lastly, our market challenges. We expect to live with zero housing industry for at least another generation. Don't see an uptick in labor. Homes will never be cheaper than they are today. I don't believe that a framer who's making $16 an hour is going to take $12 an hour next week or next year. House costs, labor is going to continue to increase. Materials are going to continue to increase, and codes are continuing to increase. So houses today, new homes today, are as never cheaper than they are. New home construction is going to hover between 22 to 32,000 in the state of Georgia. We used to be, in the state of Georgia, 75,000. The shortage of construction labor is going to move toward industrialized housing. Regulations are going to continue to push up costs. The bottom line is the numbers don't add up.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any quick question out there? Yeah, Mo.
Mr. Chairman, you need to get frank with the Department of Community Affairs. They need to make some damn changes in this state. We're in trouble. I mean, I'm not kidding. I've built houses for years. I developed subdivisions. And Frank knows this. I mean, look what's just changed in the last 10 years. Look what's changed in the last 2 years. And we're on a spiral going down, and nobody's doing a damn thing about it. He needs to go down and speak to the department in the building code area and get some darn changes done in this state. I'm telling you, we're in trouble. And it's doing nothing but going down, like you just said. This is major.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
I do have a couple of forecasts. I'll leave it here if anybody would like. I do an annual forecast, and you can email me and get on it.
No, leave those. Hey, Frank, I want to get a copy of your presentation.
Yes.
You got it, okay. Good deal.
Just a quick follow-up on those things. When you did your 30% cost, how much of that was state and how much of that was local? Well, I mean, a lot of that didn't sound like it was DCA stuff that you had to pay for with your taxes, right?
So,
You can tell me about it.
no, what's interesting is the city of Gainesville passed the International Building Code, and nobody had read it. It's 1,100 pages. Nobody read it. And when I started asking questions, you said, it says that. And so I think we need to read what we passed and then think about the unintended consequence of it. Now, the city of Gainesville is great with me. I have aggregate driveways, don't have, which allow me to save trees, stormwater issues, but, and the city was great with me, but that book drove me crazy. Still does.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right, Rusty Sewell. Rusty, we're glad to have you with us. Let me give you we're going to listen to Rusty, and then we'll see kind of what time we got left. And when we do have the lunch break, thanks again to Ben. We've got enough box lunches out there for the presenters and all the committee members, all two of us. Go ahead, Rusty.
All right. Thank you, Vance. I appreciate it, John. Why would you not buy a house from Frank? I mean, I would buy it. You know, I can see why he's been so successful. My name is Rusty Sewell. I'm a consultant with Capital Partners. I represent EIMA, which is on there. Basically, that is the exterior insulation and finished systems, EIFAS, which a lot of you, particularly in the building trade, have heard. Their trade association. EIFAS is building products, stuff that are designed to go on the outside of the house, buildings, apartments, whatever that we have. It's all approved. All of the products are approved with the International Building Code, the International Residential Code. I was glad to see when DCA was here and they were talking about that. Those codes are designed strongly, and they follow on the international side. They have all these groups. They're builders, they're government people, they're everybody that looks at those. And they're standard, very good codes. they're what government ought to be looking at as the state has adopted them as they go through looking at the need for it. That's the purpose of government. I mean, I was a government employee for 20 years, which most of y'all know. There's a need, the protection as far as, what the codes say with regard to heating, with regard to fire. These type of things are things that the government ought to be dealing with, and they do. And I think the state code is very good. The problem is, when we talk about affordable housing or what you want to build, I don't know of any builder that goes out and builds an ugly house on purpose. I mean, they don't do that. I don't think anybody goes and builds an apartment, building that is ugly or bad. They know what kind of equipment they want, they know what kind of materials they want. And then when you get to the point, and there are a number of counties, as you've already heard, you do it, you look at zoning, things like that, but you also, it's materials. They're saying you've got to build with brick, or you've got to be doing with this material or that material, which run up the cost of the house. What is the purpose of that? Where is, I can see in limited cases in a historical district or anywhere like that, but why do local governments what is their purpose in governing to say what kind of materials I must use in building my house, building my building anything? I don't think there is that purpose. Todd will disagree with me, which he does a lot of issues, but there is no purpose. Government has, and I think when, my presentation can be Frank's. I will follow what all he says. The people that Mo brought, that Hayden brought, the cost of housing. I was very entertained in the first meeting when economic development was there, and it really made me talk because they were talking about all the construction in Atlanta. Look at all the stuff around Peachtree and Piedmont. There are a lot of construction there, a lot of buildings going up everywhere that you go. Last night I was talking to a good friend. He was talking about in Buckhead, the central part of Buckhead, Fall Road, East Paces, all in there, it's getting kind of like New York City. It's, you can't see the sky anymore. You're riding through there. And those things are filling up. They're, it's not like when I remember, I'm old enough to remember when I was out of tech and out of law school, that when the Darlington, when it changed to 1 million people in the metro area, we thought that was big. We thought that was bright. Now you're talking, as Frank was showing up there, over 6 million people, which means you need 6 times the housing, the restaurants, the business buildings and everything that we had, 25 to 30 years ago. And you can see it. I was explaining to my son all these different developments. And when you do that, but what also comes about is what economic development was talking about. These companies coming in there, they have some very high-paying jobs for the consultants, the CEOs, everything. But they also have administrative jobs, people that are working in their mail rooms. There are other things that they have that there's no place for them to live, much less in the Buckhead area, as to North Fulton. Then when you go out, and the farther you go out, and if you look at some of these areas like Forsyth County or Cherokee County, that's where you find some of the regulations on housing that they want. They want quality housing. They want the same housing that's in Buckhead, and people can't afford it, so they got to go a little bit farther. Then they got to get in their car and drive down. And you drive down 400, you down 85, anywhere like that. You can't get there. And yeah, it's traffic in the morning, but why is that traffic in the morning? Because people to live and have a place, they've had to move way out. And I agree with what all has been said this morning, and maybe as an old state employee working in the governor's office, maybe I didn't do a real good job of looking at this, early on. I'm glad the committee is looking at this because, Frank kind of scares you with all those numbers. And, people cannot afford to live, and I'm not just, I talked about it around, but look at Athens. Look what's, when I was in school in Athens, it was Clark County. You never thought about going to Oconee County. There was nothing out there. It's farmland or whatever. Now you go out to Oconee County, it's spreading out. Because there's so many people. The school is not a school of 15,000 people anymore. It's a school of 35,000. Columbus, where I was born and raised, it's moved out. Savannah, any of these places, you look at the port system, look at the port system in Brunswick, other than that boat sitting out there. The jobs that has been created, so that affects all these counties. And I don't, I'm blaming local governments. I say this, they got into it, but I think they need to rethink, we need to rethink what we're doing as far as affordable housing and the regs that go in there. And are we doing it for the right reasons? Are we doing it aesthetically, or are we doing it to protect the people who build a house? Happy to answer any questions. I don't have anything else. I can explain it. I can leave y'all some materials, which I'll leave up here or over there, wherever you want to.
Front chair or
Some of this is about it gives you a little background on the International Building Code and the International Residential Code, which those are guidelines that we go by in our industry. Actually,
Anybody got a quick question for Rusty, I appreciate you coming. We talk a lot on the telephone.
Yes, sir.
Rusty's
All
back in my area of the state down there, because I'm in Harris County.
Yeah.
But, all right, here.
My brother-in-law will get you.
Yeah, that's right. I want to recognize.
I'll make an announcement though, whenever you think.
All right, let me do one thing. I want to recognize a friend back in the back, and well, he stepped out. No, there he is. I want to recognize Senator Gooch, Senator Steve Gooch, y'all. Let's give him a round. I told y'all I was coming in your territory up here, so be easy on me now.
I was at my house across the street and I heard there was a man from Pine Mountain over here talking about house. I gotta go hear this.
So we play cards here.
We'll do that later.
No, we're glad to have you, son.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Spend lots of money while you're in town now. We're gonna give some of y'all a little basket of lunch, but the rest of us can go up on the square. There's a lot of restaurants. They're all open today. They're willing to take their credit cards. If you need any pointers on where to go, let me know.
So you'll need to take our credit card up there for us.
I'll take you.
I thought you had. All right, here's the criteria. Ben, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you're gonna present this afternoon and you've got a PowerPoint, if you don't mind, whenever we do break here in just a minute, to go ahead and hand it off to Daryl and we'll get it uploaded, because he's gotta go this afternoon. So
okay.
We wanna go and get that uploaded.
Thanks, Michelle.
Your jump drive for the presentation.
My jump drive. I don't do computers. I can do this, but I just carry this one around. Look good. I get with Brian. Brian will get with you. Here's what we're gonna do. A lot of times we're right at 12 breaking, and we are always past 12:30 coming back. It's about 10 minutes to 12. We're gonna come back in at 12:30 now, y'all. We're gonna stay on schedule. When we come back, Jim, you're gonna be up first. Then we're gonna have Jimmy Cotter. He's in here somewhere. There he is, right there. And then we'll have John Hunt be here by the end, and we'll have him show up. And Austin got something he wants to say.
Hey, Austin Hackman, Home Builders Association. I just want to say in response to some of the presentations we heard this morning, especially from DCA and the construction credit program, As an industry stakeholder on that committee, I think from our perspective to Mo, that program works real well. And just to back up what Hayden said about it, that I don't think any issues arise out of the industry input that goes into that, especially from public and private sectors.
I appreciate what Ted there too. I know Commissioner Christopher Nunn, he's known him a long time. He's a good guy too. He's frequent his church sometimes up there at Methodist Church on Fifth Street. And I can always keep him out in the crowd if it's all. But no, we appreciate everybody. We do. I tell you, all you that presented this morning, great. A lot of info. I know we're packing it into a short window from 10 to 2, but it's a lot of information, and you always hear something I do. I always hear or see something on the screen that I didn't realize, didn't know. So I think it's been very informative and great crowd too, y'all. This is a great crowd, folks. And I hope you had a chance. There's a sign-up sheet going around, and look for that sign-up sheet. It may be back there on the table, but please sign up. I know some of you can't come back this afternoon. We'd love to have you stay, but those that can, thank you. Members that presented, and John and I, we'll grab a box lunch, and then y'all be on your own for a few minutes, and then we'll be back into it. Thank you. All right.
That was it.
We'll get started. Jim, we got a planner with us, so we're gonna let Jim do it like everybody else. We'll let you do your own bio.
Okay.
And we appreciate you coming and being with us, Jim.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me and letting me come in here. Yeah, my name is Jim Somerville. I am a city planner. I have been working in the Georgia area for about 30 years now. I'm actually a native of Rome. My entire career I've been here in Georgia working on stuff. About half my career has been in the public sector, the other half in the private sector. I was currently a planning consultant. So I've worked with local jurisdictions on a number of issues. Now I'll be up front. I am not a housing expert. I am an expert, however, in zoning regulations, in the overlay districts, on transportation planning, on comprehensive planning, primarily working with local communities to find their vision for the future and realizing that through zoning regulations. So what I'm going to share with you today is kind of our insight from the industry about, why do we have these zoning regulations? And you heard it does impact local housing prices. I won't deny that. But what degree does it happen? Why is it doing that? I can kind of give you a little insight into that. I'm the president of the Georgia Planning Association. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we're about 1,100 members statewide. We are made up of practicing planners that work in local governments, both administering and writing the codes that you're talking about. We also made up of academics. We have 3 planning schools in the state. We have Georgia Tech, the I'm alumni of, UGA, and Savannah State. We also have a number of concerned citizens, practicing planners, people planning officials. In fact, at your last meeting, we had Jeff Rader, who is a member of our board of directors, and he is obviously a planning official. He's part of all that. So we try to, we're not limited. Anyone can be a member of GPA that's concerned about their local community and wants to have a say in what local planning is all about. We're one of 47 chapters in the nation, American Planning Association. And we're right now celebrating our 50th anniversary. We're proud to say that our goal is to help make great communities, and we've done that in the state of Georgia now for over 50 years. In fact, our early membership actually helped found the American Planning Association. The APA is only 40 years old, and our original founders helped form that whole organization. So it's a little bit about what we do. APA, the American Planning Association has been grappling with the housing issue for quite a number of years. And as you know, this is a national crisis. Georgia's not alone by any stretch of the imagination. They've taken on a number of initiatives trying to point out the extent of the problem. As you see here, a couple factoids, 8.1 million extremely low-income households spending more than half their income on rent. There's a shortage of approximately 7.4 million homes, or 4,000 nationwide. And of course, we've got some great statistics early on about the situation here in Georgia. APA recently just adopted a housing policy that was published earlier this year. I'll kind of hit some highlights of that. But there's a whole litany of resources and tools that are available to local governments, concerned citizens at planninghome.com. I invite you to go look at that if you want to see more of what's happening in Georgia, what's happening nationwide. The APA policy guide came out in last June really talks about 4 initiatives. The first was kind of what you're trying to deal with right now. Modernize state planning laws. What can we do to get the state planning laws on board with trying to address this problem? Encourage environmental sustainability, resiliency, and critical elements of housing affordability. So many of the regulations we talk about are a result of trying to build stronger homes in the face of all kinds of natural disasters, fire, tornado, flooding, you name it. Preserve existing housing. What can we do to preserve the good housing stock we have? It's all about location. If you really think about it, there's not so much a housing shortage. There are many legacy cities all around the country. Rust Belt area, even in rural Georgia. But those aren't houses that people want. Where they want to go are the fast-growing areas around the city of Atlanta. They want to go to the areas where all those great job opportunities that Mr. Morton was showing about. So that's where you have your housing shortage. And then, of course, ensure that public and private financial supports increase housing availability for you. That's a tough nut to crack. We hear some about the mortgage loan, how we get into that stuff. Again, these are the 4 fronts that I think have to be addressed in dealing with this issue. And again, it just points out the need for a comprehensive approach. So contributing factors to high cost of housing. We've heard about that already. Market forces. This is a supply and demand issue with very movement. So much of it really kind of comes down to location. Again, it's the house in Atlanta is not going to cost the same as the house out here in Veronica. Your demand is different kind of supply and demand features, and the needs of the communities are completely different. And there's a lack of diversity in housing stock. What we've been seeing, the rising cost of housing, has been because a lot of the recent housing stock are being large single-family homes. Do people really need homes that are like 24,000 square foot or bigger? Some do, sure, but the vast majority don't. If you look just historically, going back to the 50s and all that, the average home is probably around 1,200 square foot. And for most people, that's an adequate kind of, starter home, even to much of the life cycle that you might have. So why do we need the big homes that are going out there? Again, over 50% of homes built today are over 24,000 square foot. And, just in 2009, it was over 50%, now it's over 60%. So we're built on a quarter or less than a quarter acre. So houses are getting bigger, lots are getting smaller, we're cramming them in. It's a lot of what has to do with the price of housing. So the world of land use regulations. Now this is where I am an expert in this stuff. I've spent a lot of my career writing these codes, working with local communities. One thing I want to stress is local regulations, housing regulations, are a reflection of the vision and desires of the local community. They all should be based upon what the vision is putting in the local comprehensive plan. You talked about the prejudice of local regulations. That's true. In some local jurisdictions, they don't want apartments. They're dead against it. The NIMBYs, not in my backyard. It's a real thing. I can't tell you how many zoning hearings I've been in where the crowd just gets irate. Kind of wish you had a police support when they come here. They're talking about, I don't want apartments in my backyard. That does affect what's going on. But also, I've worked with local jurisdictions and stuff which do kind of take a progressive approach. Recently, I helped out the city of Norcross, the 35 Development Code. They actually took some very strong actions in our code where we eliminated any minimum housing sizes. There's no square footage requirements there. We eliminated the need for any particular siding or bricks or anything on the outside. And that was a reflection of what the community wanted. At the same time, though, they have a very successful historic district. They have a charming downtown right down by the railroad tracks. That I call the Don't Tread on Me district. There, they don't want apartments. They're going, whatever's got to be historically, everything's got to look right, be the right size. Again, it's a reflection of what the local community wants. And that's what I specialize in, is working with local communities to find out what do you want to be like in 20 years. What you have the goals of economic development, you have the goals of preservation of your housing costs, whatever it is. Overlay districts, local regulations are a tool that local governments use to make that a reality. And of course, all these codes are prepared by a wide variety of players out there. It's not just professional players like myself. It's local politicians. It's the local land use lawyer. It may not be a land use lawyer. It may just be the local attorney that's out there. It's any concerned citizen that wants to have an input on the future vision of the community. How many of you seen that? The Muni Code screen. They've seen that going out there. That. Ideally, when you're looking for these codes and you're trying to figure out what's going on, you would think, okay, Muni Code's kind of the first place I go to. The reality is only about half the codes that we have are actually living in the code. Most local jurisdictions have their codes just on their local website. They may even just have a paper copy that's out there. One thing that I find is always kind of frustrating, particularly as a planner, is you're not going to find the local regulations that affect local housing prices and stuff just in your zoning ordinance. This could be in your zoning ordinance, it could be your development regs, it could be in your code of ordinances. It could be supplemental regulations such as sign office. It could be completely separate documents out there. One of the questions I always get asked, my friends at ACCG and GMA, they always say, well, how many local governments have urban design guidelines? How many would House Bill 302 affect? And I have to say, no one really knows, quite frankly. There is no single database of where all the local regulations are. And part of the problem is you have to look through all those 4 sources for how many, 700 approximate jurisdictions we have in the state? We actually started building a database at GPA to try to help track that, and we're actually looking into it. I can tell you that about 400 of the jurisdictions in the state are less than 5,000 population. They're not going to have urban design guidelines. They may have some regulations from the building codes and stuff, but they're not going to have even a zoning ordinance necessarily. Many of the local jurisdictions just have requirements, related to the type of housing or where buildings could be, but they don't say where in particular. They don't have a zoning map. It says this is where residential, that's where commercial is. Of the remaining, 300 or so jurisdictions, I would only say maybe about a third or so probably have true, what I call design guidelines, so about 100. So, and these are just guesses. These are the best on my knowledge of working with the communities, but we are working to try and get a good database to figure that out. The problem is it's very complex. Like I said, each jurisdiction is different. Each of them have their own vision of what the future is. Each of them have their own tools and codes to help make that vision a reality. And that's the challenge of doing together. So, and another one is the lack of uniformity in administration and fees. This is a big. I know it's very tempting to attack the regulation. To say the design regulations part is the issue. Quite frankly, I think a bigger issue is the lack of uniformity in administration and fees. A lot of jurisdictions I work with, if you were to go, say, I'm sure it costs me to build a single-family home, you would have to look that up through a variety of sources. It wouldn't be necessarily the planning department. It could be the water and sewer authority. It could be the fire department. A lot of different factors go into it, as well as the time lag of administration costs. Local planning departments these days are very short-staffed. The smaller staff they get, the harder it is for them to keep up with the demand for permits that are coming into it. I mean, if you think about it from a public service standpoint, a developer, a home builder, they're buying a product. They can't expect to come to the local government and say, I want to get a permit, I want to get permission to do what I want to do. It ought to be transparent, right? I mean, it ought to be like a food label you see in the grocery store related to the item. You ought to know how long is it going to take me to get that permit? How much is it going to cost? What's going on? I can tell you, that's not uniform at all right now. It's very, very difficult to compare application fees, zoning fees, time allotted for all this among different jurisdictions. And so it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. It's one that I think really should be addressed, quite frankly, at the state levels to help impose more transparency. What does it cost to get a permit? Require local governments to actually post it. So it's going to be, and that would help in the timeline and the delay. The time is money to a developer. So the more transparent you make it, the better off I think everyone will be. The fallacy of numbers. I kind of threw this little fruit salad here in the background. You may want to say, the point of this is you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges to bananas to grapes, just for the reasons I just described to you. I often have had the challenge of a client asking me, okay, how do our fees compare to, say, a neighboring city? Well, you go to the neighboring city, they don't base their fees the same way you do. Fees can be based upon the size of the development. It could be based on acreage. It could be based on a flat fee. It could be based on or the sheer location, how far away you from that utility line or something like that. So it's a very difficult thing to do. So I'm very, very skeptical. I know there've been you've probably seen a lot of figures, in fact, the figures thrown out today. And I'm a data junkie. I love this stuff. In fact, I'll probably throw out a bunch. But my whole point is, the cost of a house in any one jurisdiction is depending upon so many factors. Primarily location is the biggest one, but also the variety of regulations and things that you're dealing with. It's anytime you see something where it says okay, local regulations increase the cost of the house by 30%. Usually that's a nationwide average. I'm curious about what apples and oranges and grapes they're comparing because, again, a house in Atlanta is not going to cost the same as a house here in Vermont. So to me, it's a case-by-case design. So I'm very skeptical of any numbers, anything that actually says this is what it costs. I mean, I have no denial that local regulations do improve or increase the cost of housing, but to what degree, it's not an easy answer to come up with. And again, there's no single database of land use regulations in the state right now. We're working on that. I was surprised. I wanted to reach out to DCA to find out they had one, but they don't. I reached out to all of the regional commissions. Many of them had good databases on what regulations in their area, but each regional commission used that data in different ways. Sometimes they had, again, it was comparing apples to oranges or whatever. So it was a tough thing to figure out. So again, be skeptical of the numbers because it truly varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Diversity of housing products. This is something that we in APA and GPA have really kind of pushed recently. We use Native communities in workforce housing, but it's not just workforce we're trying to build houses for. It's during the entire life cycle of individuals. Our housing needs change as we get older. What helped so much when I was trying to raise a family is not going to work while I'm out and investor income into retirement. So the different needs of products, it's trying to keep up with, again, that supply and demand. What are the demands? The demand is shifting daily. It's shifting as we get older as a general population. It's shifting as our needs for why we're using that house change over time. And again, locational differences. And even, I think a big issue today too, nothing's going to be increasing the cost of housing is what we call universal design, or the desire to build housing that is accessible to anyone. The wheelchair, like you see an example here, this is a kitchen that's helped design for someone in a wheelchair. The idea of having master on the menu, the idea of what everyone needs a second story to their home. So those kind of needs and changes, the products are changing constantly. And you're from Mr. Norton, there's a lot now of, the modular construction coming on. I've heard of situations in foreign countries where they're actually using 3D printers, to actually print a house. Can you imagine? The products we're dealing with today, they're changing dramatically. So all this has to kind of go into, again, what are the local needs and concerns of the jurisdiction? Do they need more senior housing? Do they need more student housing? Do they want a 3D home built up there? Do they want to deal with the accessory dwelling unit in their backyard? So much of this is, again, going back to, what are the importance of local control, or what does the local community want? This is indeed in my opinion, more a situation of messaging and education. It's one thing to say local government can't do this or that, but really, what does the local government want to do? One of the best examples I see is ADUs, accessory dwelling units. What's really caused the discussion about that in recent years it's Home and Garden TV. You've seen all those shows about tiny houses and all that. Ever since that has come out into the market, I've had many of my clients actually ask to have ADUs in certain zoning jurisdictions be allowed. That would have never been heard of 10 years ago. The idea of having a small home, backyard, no, it wouldn't have happened. It just would not have happened. So much we feel like at GPA is the education of the public. What does the public want? And it's our job as planners and community leaders to give them what they want. So, to me, it's a matter of trying to educate what are the needs of our communities, trying to reflect, experimentation in different ways that local governments can do this. Because it's a home rule issue. We are Georgia. This is a home rule state. It feels very important for local governments to have the right to decide what kind of local regulations they want. And sure, it may increase the cost of housing, but if it's what they want, it's what they want. So, again, designs of sort of benefits of design guidelines. It highlights and enhances human character. Think of local jurisdictions such as Helen, Georgia, with all that little Bavarian style. It's economic development tool, right? Places like Savannah and Milledgeville, my hometown of Rome, they all have a very unique design character that those local, overlay districts and design guidelines help support. It is to the great extent overlay districts used as an economic development tool. Sometimes they are to help preserve housing values. That's sort of NIMBYism that comes into it, and it's certainly a part of it. A lot of times, though, a lot of the local codes and regulations we've heard, particularly with the building codes, it's related to the threat of natural disasters, fire, flood, wind. How can we build houses that are stronger in the face of natural disasters and stuff? So, again, we really stress, we feel like design guidelines, local rules help build a better sense of community support. They are a very effective tool. Now, they can have unintended consequences, but I think the challenge of government is that you have unintended consequences, change the regulation. don't just totally eliminate it. Just come up with a better tool that's going out there. And it's we as planners, that's what we like to help the government's doing. So that's my presentation in a nutshell. I hope I kept on your schedule.
That's good.
I don't know if there are any questions.
All right, anybody got any questions? Todd?
I just wanted, good presentation, Joe, thanks for coming. Just wanted to add the question, I think it's a legitimate one, is when you go to apply for a permit, what's required of any construction and also how much the permit costs. We did address that last year in House Bill 493. If that is not being done, then they're not following the letter of the law. That was a big concern. So that was a concession, a compromise that we as local governments made with some of the contractors, the other development community.
Right.
So hopefully that's getting implemented. And just as a reminder, we cannot charge local governments in fees, more in fees than it actually costs to administer this service. If obviously there may be bad apples in the group, but the law does require that that's all we charge.
I do feel that. I mean, that's a big. I mean, to me, it really is a public service situation. You know, a developer or home builder ought to know what it's going to cost them, how long it's going to take them to get the permit. You know, I recommend if you guys haven't talked to our buddies over at the Georgia Association of Zoning Administrators, see what they have to say about all this. Because there was an initial code. I'm curious what their input on this whole issue would be as well. But that's a big issue.
Question. You talk about local control, home rule, and you also talk about uniformity. How do you mesh those two? Is that what an overlay district, will that take care of that? How do you mesh
overlay
uniformity
districts
and
Mesh say
500 different?
Uniformity on the micro scale, you know, and that local, that, you know, that neighborhood needs to be preserved, that corridor, so you know that you really want to be an economic draw for tourists or restaurants. That's where you need to have uniformity. That's what kind of builds a sense of character and uniqueness. But, you know, overall for the whole city, I wouldn't want the whole state to have the same monoculture of building design or same look. You know, we don't want everything looking like just, you know, corporate America, fast food, and offices, and these modular buildings, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think there's a real role in place to express the unique character of Georgia and its local communities by having design guidelines that help support that.
Well, yep. I guess everybody's got their own opinion about that. I believe in the ordinances for safety and integrity of our home. At some point, you got family that's paid property tax all these years. They got all have private property rights and what they like, the house and their rights. Why would locals get involved with the aesthetics? They just stick to the safety.
Again, I think it's a matter of personal and local taste and flair. You know, there are some governments, local jurisdictions, we totally agree with them. Less them without fighting knives on them necessarily. Honestly, where I see the most regulations are usually the most high-priced communities. They'll even impose their own owners association bylaws and stuff. You know, they'll have a whole other layer of regulations the local government's not even involved with. You know, comes into it. So, to me, it's a matter of personal taste. I mean, if it's what the public wants, give them what they want. You know?
Public, personal, when you're so personal, I own a 2-acre lot. Well, my personal taste might not be the government's personal taste.
That's true. But hopefully you do what was when you bought it. You know, hopefully the government come in after the fact and impose something good for it. But it does happen.
That's the chicken and the egg.
Yeah, I know. And again, it's the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah. No, that's good. Any other questions? Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate you coming. We'd love to get a copy of your.
It's on there. It's on the laptop. I give some handouts to it. We have a little extra print up so if the issues are. Okay. And also people can use on House Bill 402.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Jim. All right. Let's see. We got Jimmy Cotty.
Thank you, Representative Smith, Representative Porter. Nice to have you today. Appreciate the invitation to come speak about workforce housing. My name is Jimmy Cotty. I represent the ready-mix producers of Georgia. I also represent the manufactured housing industry of Georgia. So I'm going to talk a little bit about issues in both housing sectors. Talk a little bit about some of my interpretation of some of these home rule issues I've heard a lot about, and then we'll wrap it up. So, first off, just touching off with DCA, I want to echo some of the sentiment that's been talked about in here thus far. With the Ready Mix Association, we do a lot of work with DCA, a lot of work with building codes. They have a great system for, in fact, amending statewide building codes. And so opportunities that were raised by, say, Frank Morton with regards to maybe overregulation of light switches and stuff like that, that's we have the opportunity to amend that. You know, if somebody wants to come up with an amendment, they can propose that to DCA, you can take it down there, and it can be worked through the DCA State Codes Advisory Committee process, and you make the case just like you're lobbing the bill. So potentially maybe Mr. Morton should hire a lobbyist. I'll call dibs. He's a good one, right? But any event, I do thank Ted and his team for the work they do at DCA. They do a great job here in the concerns of all the various stakeholders that they have to deal with when it comes to home building. So one of the other things that DCA does is they serve as sort of a pass-through agency for HUD dollars for local communities that are doing community redevelopment and for affordable housing projects. And so as part of that, they have to put together every so often what's called the consolidated plan. And so I just happened to look through the consolidated plan last week, and a few things caught my eye. You know, is there a need for more affordable housing? Well, their plan says emphatically yes, that there is. And then they have some sections of the plans dealing with barriers to affordable housing. And the suggestion, our public policy is a contributing factor. And according to DCA's own consolidated plan, yes, they do. You can see I pulled just a couple of quotes there stating that, like Jim had said, you've got widely varying policies with regards to local zoning, but they absolutely have an impact with regards to the cost of housing development. Further, Georgia's status as a home rule. So it's a patchwork of local laws governing land use, and then from community to community, it varies in terms of what they will allow in and what they won't allow in. I've also heard a lot through this whole debate about the state constitution and Georgia's status as a home rule state. And I've gone through and I've looked at the state constitution myself, just to read up on it, and found a few interesting things. In the section 2 of the Constitution on Home Rule for local governments, they had this paragraph about supplementary powers, and it says that local governments may exercise the following powers, and then when you skip down, there's about 15 or 16 of them, but this number 12 caught my eye, deals with building codes. And so local governments have had historically the power to do their own building codes, plumbing codes, electrical codes. But in the state of Georgia in 1991, we've adopted statewide minimum code standards. In 2004, we adopted 10 additional ones. So, and then today, DCA still has the authority to adopt even more if they deem it will be necessary for safety and general welfare. Local governments do have options where they can be more stringent, but really the question is, by adopting a statewide minimum code standard that the local governments were already allowed to adopt themselves, was this an intrusion of home rule, or is it just a sensible means of statewide construction? You know, over in Alabama, they don't have statewide building code standards. It varies from location to location. But in Georgia, we've gone the route of saying that, you know, we're going to have a sensible statewide minimum building code, and we're going to have a process in how we will deal with that building code. A couple of years ago, we had an issue where some local jurisdictions decided that they didn't like a particular style of building or a particular material that was being used to build. So they outlawed the use of an otherwise legal and permissible material, wood, in certain construction applications. The legislature said, you know, that's probably going too far. We've kind of reached a point where we need to rein these guys in. And so, you know, I look at that now, though. Well, what if I went back to the same jurisdiction and said, you know what? We have demonstrated, or the legislature's demonstrated, that the building code potentially is hands-off, but zoning is sacrosanct. So just take care of your building code issues via local zoning, And really, that's what kind of troubles me, is that we can see the potential exists now for you're doing end arounds the building codes via local zoning oriented, and then really what would be the point of having a building code law at that point. In the Georgia Constitution, a little further down on planning and zoning, all it just says is this one short little paragraph, and towards the end it says this authorization shall not prohibit the General Assembly from enacting general laws establishing procedures. My interpretation of that is the power for zoning still lies with local governments, but if need be, the legislature can install some guardrails to keep people between the lines and sort of going off the reservation. So that's just sort of my take and my thoughts around some of these home rule ideas and whatnot. Getting into industry-specific issues, coincidentally, the same time we were debating the wood bill in Oconee County, we saw a jurisdiction say we're going to ban concrete slab homes. And what's a slab home? I mean, a slab home is basically is a most basic type of home construction. It's just a solid concrete foundation board. It's very affordable. It's cheaper than building on crawl spaces. It's cheaper than doing a raised slab. It's cheaper than doing a basement. Not everybody needs those things. A slab home a lot of times is for entry-level homes. You'll see that. First-time home buyers, retirees, people with no kids, and they don't need as much space. So in Oconee County, their amendment to their Unified Development Code stipulates that in major subdivisions, you either have to build on a crawl space or a basement. I talked to some builders that do business in Oconee County. Crawl spaces would add anywhere from 20 to 40K on the cost of their home. Basements are going to be 50 to 80K. Crawl spaces are just frankly not desirable, and if the market demanded that, we would see more crawl spaces being built today without regulations mandated. Really, these regulations are just driving up the cost of home prices needlessly for people that can't afford that or don't necessarily need it or desire it. So we hear a lot about blight. If the government intervenes or the state government intervenes and they're going to start dictating zoning terms, it's going to be blight here, blight now. So in Oconee County, these are the homes that were zoned out by the slab man. These are all slab homes. These are homes that are priced anywhere from the 350s up to the 420s. And I mean, the question to you, representatives, is, does this look like blight to you? Does this look like perfectly good homes to me? The builder who had to shelf the project, and he's been dealing with the legal issues around it, but these are homes that are not going to be built in Oconee County, as a result. Moving on to manufactured housing a little bit. Discrimination amongst manufactured housing runs pretty rampant, and that's because of the image of manufactured housing. I think when people think of manufactured housing, they think of trailer parks, they think of dilapidation, they think of blight, and but that's really not the case anymore in terms of the product that they're building. These views are based on old homes, and we now adhere to, and these homes like this were built before there was any kind of standard regarding how a manufactured home is built. There are standards today, and it improves the longevity, durability, safety, resiliency, efficiency of the home. And then the American Association of Insurance Services estimates that the average lifespan of a manufactured home now is up to 51 years, which is about parity with a site-built home built via the IRC, which estimates it to be lifespan of site-built home around 53 years. This is a short video done by the Manufactured Housing Institute in Washington, D.C. And I just want to play a short clip from here, if you guys would indulge me.
In recent years, manufacturing housing is one solution that has emerged out of the limestone and stepped into the limelight, carrying the potential to permanently change the cost side of the equation.
A manufactured house is not a trailer, and it looks just as good as a site-built home, costs 30 to 40% less, is more resilient when it comes to weather. All of these kind of things are things that people don't know.
We're thrilled to be at the showcase because it gives us an opportunity to show, as an industry,
what manufactured housing can be to the American public. It's so much of an untold story. Manufactured housing has come a long way in a fairly short number of years. And now we're providing homes that rival anything built on site at half the cost. And so to meet the affordable housing crisis in this country, and there truly is a need for affordable housing, manufactured housing will go a long way to doing that.
People that, it's been interesting, because people are just so amazed at the value that we have. Methodology of building, the efficiencies of building the factory, all the labor there, the scale of the buying that we're able to do, the efficiency of utilizing the materials.
I think really innovation generally comes down to collaboration and working together, both public and private, working together to reduce regulations, create innovation, create ideas to solve the affordable housing crisis in the country.
Well, a lot of times when people think of manufactured housing, they think about trailers. We are way beyond trailers. They look just like site-built houses, and they're extraordinarily resilient. And indeed, 3 fully built manufactured homes that are here today are on display for the American people to see and experience over this next week.
Yeah, the general public is obtaining awareness of how great these houses have become, and they're going to see the value that we can provide these houses. General public's getting a great feeling for how manufactured housing has evolved and become an affordable housing solution. So we build communities, we buy these homes from the factory, we rent them out, we sell these houses. So we're hoping that they can change laws so we can build more communities.
This is what we need more of in this country. So manufactured housing, ceilings will be good.
When people think of manufactured housing, this is something they think of. And so for me to be able to come here and take a look at this, it was really, really eye-opening for me. And it gives people another opportunity to be able to have some affordable housing, a different affordable housing option. I know that families out there are always looking to get that starter home going, to get something with enough bedrooms and just the basic amenities, and this far exceeds that.
So I'm totally blown away. I mean, I've been a big supporter of this industry ever since I've been a congressperson, which I'm going into my 5th year, but I've actually never walked through one of these houses. And it is beautiful. And when I walk through here, what I see is an opportunity for people to have home ownership who never thought that they could. And what my job is to help this industry explain who they are to the general public, so that we can help people achieve what I still believe is the American dream of home ownership. And doing it in a way that's affordable, but still you get a quality product like we have here. So I'm just blown away.
Early on, especially in the 1970s, my area where I actually grew up, as I mentioned, was the manufactured housing capital of the world. We had so much manufacturing. Of course, it has grown throughout the country and many states since then, but we still have our fair share down in Alabama.
Oh, sorry. I'll start it there. It goes on for a few more minutes, but you get the idea. It's not the negative view of what manufactured housing used to be, and it provides certainly an affordable option. Here in Georgia, some of the things that we're experiencing with regards to adversity in that market, just some recent zoning issues in Sandersville, Georgia. They basically segregated them into one special overlay zone in one area of the city. Carroll County has said that you've got to have a minimum of 5 acres for the placement of a manufactured home on your private property. Parks and communities in Clayton County, if you have an empty pad and it's not been utilized in 6 months, you can't bring another one out there. And then another one not on here that I'll add. Recently, come to find that a gentleman who invested in a manufactured home, he sought in a manufactured housing community, sought a variance from the local government in order to replace all 100 homes, give basically every person in his community a brand new home. It's going to increase their rent anywhere from $20 to $40 a month, but they have a brand new home to live in. And the county wouldn't let them do it. They said that they're going to have to live in the homes that are in there until they fall down, at which point they'll all be out. So a lot of different issues with regards to manufactured housing. And again, Board Light. These are examples of manufactured houses that are being built today, built right here in Georgia. The top 2 houses up there are homes that start in the $40,000 and up. 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. and the one there on the bottom, a little bit more expensive, 4-bedroom home, starting at $120. But that gives you an idea of the types of quality of the product that's being built and sold today in the manufactured housing market. One of the things I think, particularly we found in the manufactured housing segment, is governments don't necessarily always utilize the tools at their disposal. They go ahead and write a new ordinance to zone something out when there's other tools out there. Things like they have at their disposal blight taxes to incentivize owners to clean up, code enforcement. We hear a lot about grass being too tall and junk cars and that kind of stuff. You already have codes against that. Why don't you need to enforce your codes. Macon, Georgia recently did an auction where they auctioned off blighted properties that had been delinquent on taxes and gave people an opportunity to invest in something and rebuild it. And then, of course, I'll highlight the Abandoned Mobile Home Act here. We had an issue recently in Ware County where they wanted to zone out manufactured housing. And really all they wanted to do was clean up the blight. Well, the Abandoned Mobile Home Act, unbeknownst to them, existed. And once we introduced that to them, they pulled their ordinance because they figured they have an opportunity to clean up most of what is troubling their county via the Abandoned Mobile Home Act. Federal law now, there are bills in the Senate and the House referred to as the YIMBY Act, Yes in My Backyard. We all know what NIMBYs are, and their first cousins, the K people, Citizens Against Virtually Everything. But we've got now a YIMBY Act that's basically saying if your community wants to receive federal money for community redevelopment through the Community Development Block Grant, you need to put in writing, you need to justify your ordinances and regulations that could be deemed discriminatory or that otherwise would drive up housing affordability. And it doesn't tell them what they have to do with it, it just says they need to justify it. Of course, it's a proposed law, but it adds a layer of transparency to what some of these local governments are doing. Broad coalition of support there. You can see these are just a few of the players in Habitat and Humanity, the National Association of Realtors, Brokers, Apartment Association, Manufactured Housing, of course, and others. So one thing that I asked a lot of people last year during House Bill 302 is we hear a lot about local control and whatnot, but if Congress passed a law saying that your door had to be painted a certain color, we would say, well, that's big government. That's intrusive government. Or if in Atlanta we passed a law that said you have to have certain kinds of windows, or you have to have a garage, we would say that's big government. But what I feel like we're saying with this is we're still doing the same things, but we're allowing local governments to do this under the guise of local control. But really, to me, it feels more like big government just at a local level. So with that, that's all. Welcome questions.
Concrete slab, does it meet the International Building Code?
Absolutely.
Requirements of nothing
Yeah.
in the obviously necessary.
Yep. Yeah, that's perfectly useful according to the IBC and ours.
What about the mobile home industry in Georgia now compared to the industry maybe 15, 20 years ago? Fewer manufacturers, more manufacturers?
The real recession for the mobile home guys or manufactured housing guys started in 2001. And they had not fully recovered when we had the recession of 2008. Georgia used to have, I think, about 35 manufacturing housing facilities, building mobile homes here in the state. And now we have 10, I think. I think there's been 2 new ones in the last 2 years, maybe. They're seeing a comeback in Ware County, where we talked about. Actually, that's kind of an epicenter for that industry. They have 3 manufacturers. If you drive through Waycross's industrial district, there's a lot of closed up factories with nothing going on, but there'll be 3 if you ride by. There's cars parked everywhere for people working, and all 3 of them are manufactured housing facilities where they're building mobile homes or manufactured homes. And so even in their own, one of their largest employers locally is facing issues with that. But they've fallen off significantly. Georgia's, historically they've been in the top 5 to top 10 in terms of production of manufactured houses. We're still top 10, but obviously we follow those.
Anybody in the audience got a question for Jim? Hi, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Now next we're gonna have Mr. John Hunt come up.
Sir.
John, we appreciate you being with us today. I'll let you do your own bio there.
Yes, sir.
And,
Thank you for having me. John Hunt with Viasearch Market Insight. We track and do analysis in the new home industry and have for 30 years. I was too stupid to get out of it in 2008, so here I am. I spend most of my days trying to help builders, developers, and lenders not make stupid decisions. That's getting tougher to do. We're in 22 cities in the Southeast. We're based in Atlanta. But the same thing's going on really in every one of those cities. There's a housing crisis. There's no supply. It's getting more difficult to get the price points that people can afford. So we're trying to figure out for our customers how to deal with that. The market will deal with it. We're starting to see some cutting edge things. We're going to talk about what we see in terms of barriers to being able to do that. And really the new norm that we live in that is really conducive to some of the things that we're talking about in terms of being able to build a product that'll fit people's expectations and some of the barriers to that. So there's a moderation going on in new homes across the country, which is counterintuitive because we've had 10 years of unprecedented economic expansion. We just entered the 11th year of this expansion. We've never seen one longer than 10 years. All my bankers are afraid that we're going to have a recession. We're not. That's me saying that. The recession, expansions don't die of old age, by the way. They're murdered. And something has to happen to kill it all. So I don't see it. So why are new homes moderating though in the face of 10 years of positive job growth? What's our unemployment rate today? 3.8. When I was in college 100 years ago, 5% was considered full employment. We're at 3.8. Why are new homes dropping across the country? You can see the effect. I'm going to give you the top 3 new home markets. Atlanta was #1 before the recession for a decade or more. And we're not #1 now. So just to give you a perspective of where we are in the nation, Houston's #1. Houston is known for not having a lot of regulations. You can build whatever the heck you want to in Houston. I don't know that that's why they're #1, but it certainly helps the ability of builders to get things done. But even in Houston, we've seen the collapse. This is the tax credit effect. We worked with Senator Isaacson. He used our data on the Senate floor, and then it ended. And then we had this period of boom growth, 13, 14, and then moderation's really dropped off or set in as we've gone forward. I'll tell you about why in a minute. But Houston, in terms of where they are today versus where they used to be, is about 31% below their peak. So we're still not back to full-blown recovery in the new home sector. The second biggest new home market is Dallas-Fort Worth. Again, sharp moderation. And you moderate for one of 2 reasons. Remember this from supply and demand in economics class? It's either lack of demand or lack of supply, right? This is not a lack of demand. There's plenty of demand. It's a supply problem. So Dallas is still 27% below their peak. What about Atlanta? We're now the 3rd biggest new home market in the country, pushed back from #1. Atlanta, very hard hit by subprime, more so than those 2 cities in Houston, and it affected us greatly. We had a huge drop off, tax credit, boom years as we came out of this. Here in 12, 13, 14, we've had very sharp moderation, like the rest of the country, and we are 55% below our peak in Atlanta. So we're doing 25,000 homes a year, 26,000 this year maybe, and we used to do 50,000 homes year in and year out in the number one new home market in the nation. So we're going to talk about why are we, with a larger population and positive job growth and in-migration and household formation, half of what we used to be, and it's multiple. We do this chart with Rajiv Dewan, Dr. Rajiv Dewan at Georgia State Economic Forecasting Center. It just shows how things are different. It's not lack of demand. We've had 10 years in a row of job growth. Job growth on the right, housing demand on the left. You can see homes, 90,000 home sales in Atlanta. We peaked at about 130. You see where we are now. With job growth and job loss, you want to be above zero, not below zero. What's interesting about this chart is here's the way the world used to work. I lived through that recession. NASDAQ collapsed, 9/11. Dark days in this country. New homes never felt it. The housing industry never felt it. So we had 3 years in a row of positive job growth, and we kept selling homes. How do you explain that? You didn't have to have a job back then to put you in a house. Somebody laughed. This is what economists are looking for. The relationship between jobs created and homes built. It was together. It broke apart in 2009, and now we've had 10 years in a row of positive job growth, and housing has lagged. As a matter of fact, if you look at Rajiv's Georgia forecast or Atlanta forecast growth, he had to up it because it exceeded his forecast last year. And if you look at the total number of people with a job today in Atlanta, it's higher than it was at our peak in 2006. And we're selling half the number of homes. What's the reason for that? We're missing somebody. Who are we missing? There you go. You stole my thunder. Here we go. This is the way the world used to look. This is data we produce on who buys homes in Atlanta. The rest of the country looks like this as well. In the old normal, when we were doing 50,000 homes in Atlanta, it was made up of 35 to 40% first-time buyers, 25 to 30% first move-up. That's somebody who bought their second home in their lifetime. And that all ended in 2003, and it's been utter chaos ever since. The first-time buyers came back a little bit during the tax credit, kind of hung around, and then started dropping off, and they're way down here. So the new normal is here. So if you look at who bought most of the homes when we were doing 50,000, if you put those two categories together, first-time buyers and first move-up buyers, that's 60% of who used to buy homes who don't buy them anymore for a lot of reasons. Talk about that. Plus the demographics have changed. So 100 years ago when I bought my first home, you were average age 25. So if you're my age, you graduated from college, took a couple of years to get established, you got married, all your buddies got married because you had to be in their weddings, you had babies, and you started buying a house at 25. People back then used to move on average every how many years? 7. Back then it was 7 years. So you're 25 buying your first home. I'm 35% of all new home buyers. 7 years later, I'm 32, and I'm 30% of all new home buyers. So that's 60%. What do we call this age group today? Millennials. What's the average age of a first-time buyer in today's new normal? It ain't 25. 33. Everything's being pushed back. So this is who we're missing. And I think we can get them back.
When does that catch up, though? When you start buying a house and so forth?
They have. And again, in the interest of time, I took some of these slides out. The truth is, when we think about millennials, what we used to think about millennials is no longer true. They're 34, 35, and they're getting married, not planning on having kids, and they are buying. They're not buying new, though. They're tending to buy resale, because they do watch HGTV, and they're buying a 1,800 square foot, 50-year-old bungalow, and they think they can fix it up in 30 minutes like they do on TV, and it works for them. But they're not buying new homes, because they're not going out where we're able to build new homes right now. It's a good question. So what's causing some of the, keeping them out of the market is massive inflation in horizontal costs. This deals with the flat part, land prices, development costs. We've also got builders dealing with inflation and vertical costs for sticks and bricks. So we'll look at both of those real quick for Atlanta. I think this is significant. So what would happen if you waved the magic wand and every distressed lot that banks own disappeared? In the core counties in Atlanta, they're pretty much gone. But as you radiate out into the outlying counties, we still have a supply of distressed lots, which is where we're moving to because it keeps our price point here. And there's a certain buyer that will move there. So we poll our developers in each of our cities, and I want to give you a shocking stat on what it costs to put a lot on the ground by city. It varies dramatically. This is just the cost to develop a lot based on my custom. It does not include land, does not include what you pay the bank or your profit. It's just the cost to put the lot on the ground. And it goes from 25 grand to 60. Wow! So let me tell you the cities: Columbia, Savannah, Chattanooga, Augusta, Greenville, Birmingham, Charlotte, Nashville. Who's number one? Yeah. 60 grand. So as I'm dealing with my customers, the price that it costs you just to put the lot on the ground, forget land and carrying costs, puts a floor below which you cannot go on your home price. Does that make sense? And if it's 25 to put the lot on the ground, it's a much lower floor than if it's 60. Why are we 60? And Savannah and Chattanooga and Columbia are below 30. Is it topo? It's not labor. It's not commodities. The vast differential between 60 and 25 is additional government regulation that we have on putting the lot on the ground in Atlanta that they do not have. There you go. A barrier to us getting affordable housing. Matter of fact, the problem with that, and we've been shouting this since 2015, is that once you run out of cheap lots in Atlanta, it's going to severely hinder your ability to hit lower price points. Because if you're 60 grand to develop a lot, by the time you put the land in and carry costs and don't work for free, you're at $100,000 minimum lot price, and most builders are going to build a $500,000 home on a $100,000 lot because that's how they make money. So if you're at $500,000 in the home price in any of these core counties in Atlanta, I don't care if you're in the most expensive one for Scythe, but this chart, this is an accrued market share. This tells me that at $500,000, 88% of all housing demand is below your ability to reach. Do we want to be there? No. We're forced to be there. If you do the same thing we've always been doing. And the truth is, we track those lot prices, and absolutely what we predicted is happening. If you look at Forsyth County, the average retail lot price is already well above 100, and the other counties are rushing headlong to a $100,000 lot price as well. So that's what's going on there. The other part is the vertical side. So we did a study in Bryan County where they've had some ordinance changes that are going to increase the price of the homes anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 on top of what's already been increased by losing the distressed lots. These are numbers that are small, you can't see this, I'll read it to you. But the average home price in Bryan County is $284 today. And there's a 3.6 months of supply. That means there's plenty of room for additional supply because the normal month supply is 6. 6 is equilibrium. So at 275 to 3, we've got room for additional inventory. What the ordinance is going to do is push us above 3, and we're already at 6.1 and 6.5 months of supply. There really is no more room up there for more homes, but we're being forced to put them up there if we want to build this county. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that people's incomes can magically go up just because we decreed a $30,000 increase in the cost to build a home. People's incomes are static today. And you can see at $250 in Bryan County, 50% of demand is below your reach, but at least you're able to hit 50% of it. We're pushed up to 300 grand. All of a sudden, 74% of people can no longer afford a home. When you're pushed up to 350, you're at 86%. So it's very, very tight and a very price-sensitive market. Highly elastic is the economic term. In fact, if you look at Bryan County in the last, since 2015, the average actual appreciation yearly, this is every year plotted on top of each other for home sales, it's about 1.6% a year. What we're being asked to do is add another 10% on top of that with additional ordinances, increase the cost of the house. It won't work. Builders are going to have to go somewhere else. We're already being forced into this area up here because of running out of distressed lots. So this is what closed in Bryan County in 2017. This is the current inventory, and it's 20% higher than it was 2 years ago. Again, I would submit to you that my building customers don't want to be up here. They'd rather be back here. So how can we get down there? The other issue is, I think, kind of a mistaken concept of vinyl siding. That's one of the things they're trying to get rid of. One of the things we did in this study is we looked at the appreciation over time of homes of different cladding, different exterior cladding, and we took the same home, its initial sale, and we took it at its most recent sale, and we calculated the difference in price. Had help with the local real estate association doing this. It's interesting that brick appreciated, all brick at 2.37. Stuff with vinyl or vinyl partial was higher. So this is a misconception on the market's acceptance of vinyl, but the market wants that the cities are telling you to take it away. So it's interesting. Sometimes don't mess me up with facts. There we go. So Robert Dietz says the challenge, and he's the chief economist for our association, is putting inventory in that entry-level space. How are we doing that? So we're having to grapple with this, having to keep our businesses open and not lose money, so how are we doing it? We have two options, really. Unless we have a rollback of regulation on the development side and on the sticks and bricks side, you're going to have to deal with it in other ways. The two ways that we're dealing with it really in every city is we're chasing the cheaper dirt further out. This is called drive to qualify. Have you heard that term before? I don't want to assume it. This is getting on downtown Atlanta and 400 and going to Buckhead and getting off the interstate saying, I can't afford this. And then you go to Roswell and you say, I can't afford this. And then you go on, and you're in Dawson County, you can finally afford a home. It's called drive to qualify. And so we do have cheaper lots outside the perimeter, outside the core counties. We're seeing those outlying counties take market share over as builders and buyers are pushing further out. So we are seeing people do that. What's interesting is it's not who we thought it was going to be. We, in my industry, thought it was going to be this person, millennial. So this is today's demographic buyer groups. You've got the boomers on top that were the biggest consumer group. They were just supplanted by millennials. And the smallest consumer group is the traditional school-driven buyer with a family. So we thought the millennials were going to get sick of paying rent, rush out to the burbs and buy our homes. And they're not. They're staying in their apartments. So who's moving further out? It's the older part of this demographic. If you've heard of Sun City, Peachtree, Del Webb, those big master plan communities, most of those people are 60 plus. And it's this buyer who can no longer afford to be in good school districts in close-in areas. They'll go where they can afford. So it's not this group. It is the older part of this group and this group that's moving out. Where are the first-time buyers? We can't give them what they want at a price they can afford. So the other option is, instead of moving further out, to build smaller, closer in. That's happening in every city. This is how we're dealing with price increases. We're doing density. So we are seeing townhomes begin to take off as a natural progression from detached. Every city is seeing townhomes go up. It's a way to mitigate the cost. Where you can get it developed. We're getting a lot of pushback. Not in my backyard, no townhomes, no apartments, no density. So who's doing that? It's not this buyer, typically. It is the younger part of this buyer and the older part of this body. These are the two biggest consumer groups in the country. But let me explain something. Before we had a recession, the world didn't look like this. We had this dark 10 years of mystery. If you take 15 years away, these people who don't have kids today are a big bulge on the top end. This is called a barbell. These people 15 years ago, what? Had kids. They were here and broke. They were here. They were the bulge in the middle. 15 years ago, when a lot of our zoning is still a carryover from, we were zoning 4,000 square foot houses with side entry garages in good school districts, because that's what everybody wanted and needed. Then we had a recession, and 10 years went by. Guess what? Now I don't have kids. I don't need 4,000 square feet. I don't care about schools. 50 to 60 has a lot in common with 34. Dual income, no kids. Just got rid of my last kid. Every night's a party. I like to take Uber to the bars just like everybody else. So what our zoning is, a carryover, is here. So we're zoning for what doesn't exist anymore. So you've got these people who want to get rid of their 4,000 square foot houses, and we built a lot of those over the last 20 years. We don't need to build any more. They want to get rid of them so that this person can now buy it. What do they want to move to? Yeah. These people want to move out of an apartment at 700 square feet into a house at 1,500 square feet. These people want to move out of 4,000 square feet into something at 2,000 square feet. Right? Do you know how difficult it is to get anything zoned less than 2,000 square feet in this state? I stand before these city councils all day long out in my backyard. You're not serving your citizens. It's a different world today. It's my opinion. Disposable income, no kids, entertainment oriented. These people have a lot in common. Some of the best-selling subdivisions in Metro Atlanta right now have these two demographic groups buying it. Horrible school systems, by the way. Great locations where all the action is. The location is the amenity, not necessarily the square footage they're living in. So it's not just townhomes, though. That's the natural progression. I think today's demographics, including millennials' preferences, are lending itself to smaller square footage and stuff in the middle. It's anything less than 2,000 square feet. I think we need more 1,750, 1,500, 1,250, 900. It's the stuff in the middle we're missing. We got the apartments, we got the 3,000 square foot houses, 2,000. It's the stuff in the middle that we're not zoning and allowing to be built. The market wants it. So, everybody's dealing with this. A year ago, I actually spoke at this event. It was a missing middle Greenville County Housing Forum. The mayor was here. I spoke. Karen Paralek of Opticos spoke. It was the mayor, city council, county commissioners, stakeholders, builders. What was the reason for this meeting? And if you've been to Greenville, what a great job they've done with their public spaces. What a great town. The mayor stood up and said, we did a great job on the public spaces. We screwed up housing. And this is what this meeting was about, the stakeholders. If you've been to Greenville, cool restaurants and shops downtown. The business owners are up in arms because they can't get workers to work in all those cool places because they can't live anywhere near. And so this is what this was about. You're never too old to learn. I learned two phrases. I'm 30 years in this business. I learned two phrases I've never heard before. Missing middle, one you talked about, ADUs. Accessory dwelling. I've never heard any of that. It's interesting that some of the most cutting edge concepts that can be potentially brought in to help us with workforce housing are actually old ideas. ADU is a 200-year-old zoning. Did you know that? What was it? It was the servants' quarters before the Civil War. And then after the Civil War, what was it? A granny flat. And then we put granny in the nursing home and the zoning went away. It's coming back. Missing middle is a very old concept. And I was blown away by this. It's the stuff in the middle. It's not the single family detached. It's not the apartments. It's really not the townhomes. It's the stuff in the middle. Let me give you an example. And I've been all over the Southeast. I always go into the downtown areas and look for those older neighborhoods that are quaint and y'all love, that are 1940s, pre-1940s architecture, bungalows, all that kind of stuff. And I look for the missing middle. Look for it. You will find it in every city. And we love it. And we think it's so cool. What is it? It's all that stuff in the middle that we don't see done anymore. It's this. It's a single family home. You've seen this. This happens to be in Grant Park. Right next to what looks like a single family home, but what is it? It's duplex. What's wrong with it? Okay, so my Dr. Lord lives here. Right next door, who teaches his kids in school, lives right here. Or who serves in the local bar. What's wrong with that? Nothing. You know what's wrong with it? This zoning is illegal today in most cities across the country. Did you know that? You cannot do this zoning, except for exceptional cases. I like this. This promotes upward mobility among the community and not exclusion, and I think we need more of it. So Greenville has adopted in their comprehensive plan incentives for missing middle housing. If you bring them a piece of dirt that you own, or you bring an idea on a piece of dirt they own, they're incentivizing this multi-density concept that is really very old and allows you to do duplexes, quads, and eightplexes right next door to single-family detached. I love it. I think it's part of the answer, not the only answer. But if you Google missing middle, it's starting to be all over the place. It is part of the answer. ADUs, manufactured housing, God forbid, tiny homes. I think a lot of that stuff we're going to have to do. And it is actually the perfect bridge to the missing millennium. I think that the millennial, in the same way that they've absolutely brought our retail industry to its knees in this country, because that's who did it. We're shutting down thousands of brick and mortar locations across this country because the millennials don't shop anymore. Don't think they're not going to make the same change in housing as they moved to the system. They do. And I think it's cool. So that's all I got. Any questions?
How about that? Any questions? No, that's interesting stuff. Oh, okay.
Yes.
One question about your bar graph early on when you were showing the cost of the lot development for Atlanta compared to other cities.
Yeah.
Is that Metro Atlanta? And how far do you consider that? Because the next slide you showed had some of the outer circle.
Yeah.
Based on.
You know, we're not developing yet in those outlying counties because we still have enough cheap lots that are distressed that we're building on those in terms of Clayton and Carroll and Paulding. So it kind of remains to be seen if it's going to be as expensive. It's probably going to be less expensive to develop in some of those outlying counties, but a lot of it is still going to be there. So when I say 60, those are the 5 core counties.
It was the Metro.
Those are 5 core counties.
Thank you.
You go outside, you probably get less.
My question is about that also. Do you have a list of the additional rules and regs?
I don't, but I get it from my builders. Yeah, I can get it from my builders.
Right, what
Yeah,
makes up that
water
$10,000?
Yeah, it's EPA, EPD. It's extra concrete on the retention ponds. It's multi-layered. It's also the time associated with getting a permit and being able to get it.
That missing in the middle, and you use Greenville, which is a great example there. Are there other cities that are starting to look at that you know of and let a single family home and a duplex go in together?
Yeah. And again, in the interest of time, I took some of the slides of it, but even in the heartland, if you go to Omaha, Nebraska, which is, middle of the country, one of the most cutting edge missing middle communities is being done in Omaha, Nebraska that has all that stuff in it. So what I'll do is I'll put those slides in this when I send it to you, so you'll have those additional areas. So
No, that's good. No, that's good. That's good.
Cool. Yes.
John, and your home is in Atlanta, right?
Yes.
We got one back here.
I figured you talk about millennials, might as well have a question from one,
Good.
With some of these smaller homes that you're talking about, anywhere from 950, I guess, to maybe 2,500, with these zoning allowances and you start to see more saturation in that market, what do you see from a price point in the next 3 to 5 years? If they do allow, coming into these homes, refurnishing these homes, wanting to live in these homes, what are you seeing from a perspective there?
From a price point perspective, let me address that from a couple of ways. So what I fight and what I come up against in either a homeowner association where we're looking at building smaller homes, or a city council where we're looking at getting a tighter density, just to get the price point down, and to be honest with you, to make the deal work financially, is, well, that's going to bring pricing. The truth is, the price, the absolute price is one thing of the house, but the true price is the price per square foot, right? So when you bring that, and I'll give you an example. I've got a city in Atlanta who has a development. They want the builder to do 100-foot wide lots with side acreage garage and be in the $700,000 price point. Well, the builder wants to do active adult 2,000 square foot houses for $300,000.
Right.
Well, if you look at the $607,000 houses that are selling in that area, resale, they're all 6,000 square feet. So they're $100 a square foot. So what you're going to build at 2,000 square feet might sell for $300. The price per square foot is much higher. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect in people's minds between going from 6 to 3, bringing your price point down, but they don't know how prices are set because they're set by appraisers. And the appraiser ain't going to look at the 2,000 square foot house to appraise your 6,000 square foot house. Does that make sense? So does that help answer?
Yeah, it
Your
does.
price per foot goes up.
And that's what I kind of assumed,
Yeah.
but it's assuming, especially if something's in the city.
A lot of the examples given by you and previous speakers dealing with local government regulations and the cost of the houses focus on the northern end, Forsyth, Cherokee, Fred Gwinnett. Were these same issues around for east, west, and south of Atlanta, say Rockdale, Clayton, Douglas counties?
It's a city by city basis. I'm telling you, I'm very excited. I just did a feasibility study for the city of Hampton in Henry County in south side of town. Who gets this? They're doing walkability, they're doing a downtown big development. They're doing 700 square foot cottages that they're going to sell. That's thinking outside the box. And it's on the south side of town. I love it. It just depends on the cities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I live in East Point. We tried to zone for tiny houses or micro houses, and it didn't catch a lot of flack. It didn't quite go.
That's a Jim Chapman thing. Yeah.
Still working on that issue, but
I like that idea.
You said it's local government. Some of them are catching on, some not.
Yeah, it's going to take time to ripple through the system. Yeah. So good questions. Thank you.
I've only been in this place twice, and it's up, I'm trying to think of the name of it, Avalon? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
North Fulton.
Yeah, North Fulton. What's that considered? I've been there, two meetings twice, I know.
Yeah, it's the walkability. I mean, again, it's more apartments than it is for sale housing.
Oh, okay.
I think as we move forward, we'll, like Halcyon, which is another one they're doing just up 400, McFarland, is going to be more housing and a little less apartments, but more tight housing. So, but that concept of walkability works if you create it like they did at Avalon, because there was nothing there. But it also works if you take an established city like Tacoma or Hampton or Powder Springs or anything, and you bring that in. People want that walkability, whether you're in downtown Atlanta or in Greenville or in Hampton or in Tacoma. So, but you've already got the infrastructure in a town, and you can just build it around it.
I see another hand in the back there. Is anybody else? How about Cerebee? That just hit me all of a sudden.
Cerebee is an anomaly.
Yeah, okay.
It's an agrihood.
Yeah.
It's an agrihood. It was before its time, but it's south of town.
Well, a lot of its bill is transfer development, right? So a lot of that land's taken out of development. So that goes counter to what we're learning about here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But people like it.
Hey, John, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll get you the slides.
Yeah, no, that's good. We appreciate that. Hey, y'all, we're gonna all get an apple. We got a few minutes ahead of time. Hey, this has been good. I appreciate everybody. Look, we're gonna have a wind-up meeting. We're gonna work on the report, and then we're gonna have a meeting just to talk about just the report, and we'll come up with a date and advertise that in December, early December. And we'll have that meeting at the Capitol, well, in the LOB, the CLOB. The CLOB across the street, and in one of the big meeting rooms there. So we will put that out and we'll come up with a little report. Some of you have been here since we started in Athens, went to Tipton, now we're here, thanks. But I really appreciate all the good questions and good comments and the good presenters. Appreciate everybody. It's all right for everybody to have their own opinion. I go to this place called the General Assembly, and some days there are 180 different opinions. So that's what our country's built on, and I appreciate it. All right, have a safe travels home, and give us a call anytime. John and I, easy access. If you got a question, call us.